All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jordan B. Peterson community. This is a weekly recap of the conversations that have happened in the Jordan B. Peterson study group. We have 3 different meetings across different time zones where we work through Peterson's lectures and also have a general discussion with other Peterson fans. Now, at the end of every second month, we also do the Jordan B. Peterson reading group where we discuss one of Peterson's recommended books. Last month it was Crime and Punishment. The next one will be happening on March 24th, which will be Peterson's 12 Rules of Life. And you can find all of this information at jordanbpeterson.community. So instead of .com, .community. Now, I'm joined here with Sumit and John, who was there for the first Bible discussion, and then I'll be taking over for the MAPSA meeting and then the latter Bible discussion. So I'll kick it off and hand it to either John or Sumit to kick off their takeaways.
Sumit, you have the notes, so.
Okay. So remember that phrase Steve Jobs used, stay hungry and stay foolish. So this to me sounded like a lecture where that phrase finally makes sense. So I'll just get started with the what happens to you when you don't follow your interests. So Peterson talks about how whenever it is that you don't do what your kind of this thing that is deep inside you is telling you, and if you do that for long enough, you can end up in a pretty hellish place. And that was so right, because I have been doing that for a long time, and you can really end up in a kind of difficult place if you do that for long. So in this lecture, this was probably the most important takeaway, that if you do follow your interest, then you would feel like a fool, because you will be surrounded by all this unknown territory that you don't know anything about. So first few times you'll feel like a fool, and but if you continue to follow your interests and right, and over the course of the time, he talks about how there is no we don't know what is possible for you. That if you do put yourself together, and if you do continually keep following your interests, we just don't know how much you will be able to achieve. So that was really important for me to hear. But the another thing we discussed was that doesn't solve the problem. You could realize that yes, I have made some mistakes, now I want to put myself together, but that is not to say that you will. He talks about how you can be in love with the worst part of yourself, and then in order to make progress, you will need to give that up, you will need to sacrifice that part, and you will need to create a new version of yourself. So you will continually keep dying and being born again, and that's the most difficult part. Even if you understand all that you need to keep trying, you actually by your own will might be complacent in your own destruction. So that also happens, and there was no like answer for that. John, you have anything to add?
Yeah. No answer for what question? Like, what's the question that you were having then?
The question was that even if you realize all this, you would still fall back in your old behavioral pattern, where you continue to do the things that you were doing earlier, the things that were destructive. Like realizing this thing is not enough for you to change. Like,
Well,
what if you are continually seduced
yeah,
by the things that you shouldn't do? Yeah, so
it's kind of a cliche phrase, fake it until you make it, where it kind of means that if you're wanting to achieve something, you'll kind of go into motions, even though it's just like trying to learn the piano. You'll have to continually make the correct movements over and over and over again until it kind of comes naturally all of a sudden. It's yeah, it's practice makes perfect. And so even if your current self is someone that is incapable of achieving the types of things that you want to achieve, or are limited by your own current bad behaviors, then in order to get out of that rut, you have to kind of replace it with these different good behaviors that you want to continue doing. And there's a plenty of different uh, kind of behavioral psychologists that go into how you can achieve doing those types of things, and even like animal trainers. That there's this book called "Don't Shoot the Dog" by Karen Pryor that is kind of all about the lessons that can be learned from her. She was like a Marine trainer at like SeaWorld or something like that. And so she kind of developed this whole process for working out all bad behavior for a child, for an animal, for a dog, for a human, for yourself, and then figuring out how to get good behavior kind of developed. And I don't know, it's an interesting notion, I think. Or at least I'm fascinated quite a bit by that whole process.
yeah, it's a really difficult process, like giving up the parts of you that are not are counterproductive. That's really hard. Like uh, i'm I'm not surprised. Like uh, I would assume by default most people would fail at that kind of task.
Hmm. Well,
But
they do. Yeah, we all do over, and we have to kind of continually fail until we can kind of at one point finally not fail at this one thing, and then we can kind of move on to fail at some other thing that we're trying to get at over and over and over again until we can succeed at that one thing and then fail at something else that's even better. And then it's just a repeated process. It really is the story of Sisyphus kind of putting up or taking a boulder and trying to bring it up the hill, but it's kind of a bunch of different boulders that you have to continually do.
Another thing about that is, if you continue to fail, like you continue to like keep going down, and the things pile up. So the another interesting thing he points out is this Abraham person. He's like the worst person to actually do the things that he's called upon to do. So so he's really old. um, he doesn't have children, and he wants to have children, and uh, it sounds like a fool's errand when he first starts to follow this path. So I found that was kind of helpful, that even if you have failed, and you don't think you are you can be redeemed. I think it was so Abraham's story does give you like some sort of hope. Another thing he talks about is faith thing. Earlier we were discussing what does Peterson means by God. So he talks about how if you do the right thing,
I
Sumit?
think we lost Sumit.
Ah.
All right. John, do you want to take over then?
Yeah.
Well,
It seemed like he was or to continue his thought that it seemed like he was going with, if you're doing the right thing, that is kind of equivalent to devoting your life to your conception of God. So it depends on what your conception of God is, and that's the aim that you're going to be that you're going to be following. But
all right.
Are you there, Sumit?
Okay, I just had the electricity just
Oh, okay.
we
Yeah,
had power.
we figured.
Yeah.
Yeah. All righty. So I
You,
think
you want to
finish up your point for that one.
Yeah. So
about what Peterson's conceptualization for God. Finish a minute. We were talking.
Now we've lost John.
No, I'm here.
All right. Yeah. Okay. We lost Sumit again.
Okay.
Sumit.
Back?
yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
You should.
Yeah,
You should
so-
get a UPS, dude.
Yeah, I'll if I'm going to spend time with you, also I probably need to get a UPS. Yes, you're exactly right. Yeah, it keeps on happening again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his conception of faith is that you have to have faith that if you do the right things, then over time, the outcome will be right for you, and that is so interesting because if you don't have that belief, if you think that in order for things to work out you need to be cruel or crooked or some kind of jerk, then that progress is just not possible. And mostly, like we discussed, sometimes we are surrounded by a social or cultural environment where there is a lot of pressure on you to lie and be deceitful, thinking, because that's what the environment is. And if you don't have this faith that if I follow the right path, things will work out fine for me, if you don't have that, then you'll just fall prey to all those things. So I think that was interesting. And yeah.
I wonder about this because there was some TV show that I saw, like an investment TV show, and some guy, yeah, here we go. The Bullet Bowl. If anyone saw this Bullet Bowl investor thing, it's a little video clip, and this guy's created a game called Bullet Bowl, and then he's pitching it on like Shark Tank or one of these, like, I don't know, these investor shows. And the people are just like, this isn't going to become an Olympic game. We really think you need to reconsider everything. But then he's really upset about this because he devoted his entire life to this game. But then 2 years later or so, he got a market with disabled people. So it's not going to, it doesn't seem like it's going to become an Olympic game, but he was actually able now to take on feedback, I think, and then try a different avenue. Oh, okay. Apparently it's now a new event in the 2012 Senior Olympics. So maybe he did get his goal. But because one of my concerns is sometimes, like, I think if we take what was said accurately, then it's like it needs to be there, but also with feedback. Because if you're not going to take on feedback, then you can't adjust your tactic. So you can still keep like the same goal, but you need to change your tactic. And then sometimes you actually have to change your goal, I think, because sometimes your goal may be a little bit delusional. Like one instance for myself was like I was invented like an open source content management, but it was like a static site generator thing. And I was like, this will one day replace WordPress. This was my goal. And it took me like 3 years to realize that goal was completely incorrect. And then I refused to accept that for a while, and then eventually I accepted it. Then I was able to move on and be better. So.
Yeah, that was one of the I don't know, really interesting things from Peterson that he had talked about during this lecture was that anytime he had actually done something and like put his entire full effort into it, he had always kind of gotten something out of it. And it's hardly ever like I think what he had said was he had never like regretted putting his entire effort into doing that thing. And the achievements that have come from him putting his effort into it haven't always been what he had expected to get, but nevertheless they were extremely useful in how they've kind of developed him as he goes on. So even when you fail, there's some sort of higher reward maybe in just the knowledge of how you came to fail, and then from there you can utilize that failure and know how to not fail in that same way again in the future.
Right. That's one of the things I did with my hitchhiking trip in 2015, because I did it and then I was like, okay, I'm going to go from Perth to Brisbane, which is like 6,500 kilometers, and hitchhike that. And then I was like, well, if I do this journey, well, it was a mutual thing. One was like, I want to become more patient and I want to improve my faith in humanity. And hitchhiking will, like, doing that journey, it is impossible not to acquire those things if you do that journey. So then it was like a way of thinking, well, you know, by doing that journey, then I will accomplish those traits. So then it wasn't really more about that goal. It was actually about trying to figure out a journey that will accomplish these traits instead. But it was also like a mutual thing, because then, like, even if I didn't make it to Brisbane, then would I have accomplished those things that the journey was meant to show me? Right. So then I think that's a bit similar to what you just said.
Yeah.
Alrighty,
Sumit?
Yeah, like you point out that you maybe need to be more intelligent about this thing. Because that's what even Abraham does. He does seem to follow this path, but there are times when he's kind of being more cunning and sly, like when he told that king that she's not my wife, she's my sister. So I guess it's okay as.
But didn't God tell him to lie, though? I thought God told him to then say it was the sister. Maybe I misinterpreted that.
That was his own idea, that if those kings will take away his wife and kill him. Right. So he told them that she happens to be my sister. But you would say there is a difference between him doing it or some other guy doing it, because if you look at if you zoom out and look at their whole path, Abraham is the guy who has this path that he's following, that is laid out for him, right? And I guess it's different when you kind of are chasing deceit as opposed to when you are chasing the truth, and in that chase you end up making some mistakes.
Okay. I just misremembered that story.
Okay, so that's pretty much it for the Bible lecture, I think.
Okay.
There are another things, but we wouldn't have any answer for that. Like, there are some open questions, like this question of staying hungry. Like some people just where does this interest come from? Like you are interested in what you are interested in. You don't control it, and you would find that some people are just more hungry than the others. Like. And there are some other people, like no matter what happens, they just don't care about the truth or following their interests. So that is a strange domain.
No. Okay. And I see in the study group notes, you also have the note acting stupidly and not facing the consequences. And I think sometimes maybe you know, people also do that then with goals. Like they'll just embrace the goal and then not actually think of a plan or how they plan to accomplish the goal. They just think pure ambition and faith is enough, rather than actually developing a plan that aligns with also reality and the feedback that you receive. So then, of course, there's going to be consequences if you don't align with reality. But you still have the question of how do you distinguish what's real? And I'm not sure if he ever talked about in the lecture or not, but that's a really hard question. Like,
how do you distinguish
what's real? Like when people give you feedback, how do you know whether to take it on or not? Because you like, anytime you become popular, then you're going to get conflicting feedback. Some people tell you to do one thing, some people tell you to do another. So how do you distinguish which one is actually the appropriate feedback to take on board?
I think it comes from, what is it, his third rule from his book is to align yourselves with people that want the best for you. So if you're taking feedback from people that are actively wanting the best for you, as opposed to perhaps people that want the best for directly just themselves, then if it's feedback, if they're wanting what's best for you, it'll be more attuned to what would be obviously best for you. For other people, it could be that they are trying to bring you down to a place so that they feel better about themselves. And so you can kind of tell what's constructive criticism and what's just criticism, is because Owen Benjamin talks about this quite a bit on his morning kind of calls that he does, where there's people that are just kind of say, oh, your song sucks. And so he's like, that's not helpful at all. You got to say your song sucks because it repeats the same storyline over and over again. You could maybe instead do a similar new kind of bridge or chorus right here in order to make it better. And so there's two kind of criticisms that you can see, that there's somebody trying to actively help you, or there's somebody that's trying to tear you down so that I guess they feel better about themselves. And you can still kind of
situation, which is maybe you're just going to say that, but there's this situation where someone could be giving you suggestions and they don't actually know why they should do that suggestion. They just feel that that suggestion is appropriate. So, because I think then how do you distinguish which feedback to take on is understand why that feedback is applicable. Because you need to know if that feedback is actually applicable to you or whether people are just saying it as a general rule. And I think there's also the bit here, which is, actually, no, I think that sums up my next bit that I was going to say about that. Anyway, I think that's a little good way of distinguishing it. Oh, so this is it. So if someone does care about you, like if it's following that rule, then if something does go wrong, or either way, even before you act, then you could have a conversation with them, and then you can find out why they think it is applicable. Why do they think it's going to be good? And they can say, I've got this other feedback. Do you think that's going to align? Or do you think your feedback is better or more applicable? So you can actually engage in discussion. When if you can't kind of engage in that discussion, then you're going to also have an issue. And I think maybe another part in that is then you have what the business books would say, which is, take feedback from people who've already accomplished what you want to accomplish, kind of thing, in a particular area, rather than just taking, and I think Peterson said that in 12 Rules of Life, which is everybody knows the ways to fail, but not everyone knows the ways to success. Because the path to success is always different, when the path to failure is always the same. So what one needs to do is really find out and work together as a team with other people who also care to try and find out your unique path to success. Or paths, I guess, to success. All right, Sumit, was there anything you wanted to add on that, or should I take over the maps of meaning? Or John, now that you're back?
I wanted to kind of sum it up because I'm now back to the notes that we made. Okay, so another thing was when me and John discussed was people would choose comfortable hell over some kind of adventure. So so when the story starts, God tells Abraham to leave his comfort zone and go out there and go out there and do things, whatever it was. So and he also tells him to move away from his kins or his family. So this I have seen, like how destructive this can be, because I have this friend who wakes up in the morning, his parents and now that he's married, his wife makes the tea for him, the lunch, the dinner, everything, washes his clothes and everything, and which is good, but then he also wants to become a creative artist, and right now he just is doing a like 9 to 5 job that he's really not interested in. It's very repetitive. So and he just gets trapped in that comfort, because when I went to his home, it's very, very comfortable for him, and he just doesn't want to get away from that life, and he's continuously miserable because he's not following his interest. So that, and every time he sees people on TV who are kind of following the interest, so what he wanted to become, that just drives him nuts, right? So that is certainly there. So you have to get out of your comfort zone, and at times even get away from your family, and it's really hard to choose. It's really hard to do this.
Yep. Alrighty. I'll start off with then the maps and meaning discussion. Then, and we'll kick back into the final Bible discussion then. Just that's the order that we did the calls in. So, all right. So for the Bible discussion, first point we have here is there was the question that was posed about why did the Jewish culture, or Jewish people, or the people who are part of the Jewish culture, which you could probably say are Jews, have dominated the high tiers of success through history. It also seems, not just now, but through history, and then that's generally called the Jewish question. And one of the things that it seems that really stood out, because we sussed it out through the calls. And there's actually a slide at 1 hour and 11 minutes through Maps and Meaning number 9. But I will talk about the little note here, and then we'll dive into the slide. So it is actually, let's do the slide first, and then because then that will be a nice introduction. So let me share my my screen here. All right, present to everyone. Perfect. Alrighty, so we have, oh shit, is that still showing the thing? Okay, wait, let me.
Yeah, it was.
Oh yeah, there we go. Is it, maybe that's a bit better. Okay, so
John,
we
are you seeing the presentation?
What? It's working, right? Or is it not working?
It's not working for me. Okay. John, is it working for you?
Yeah, I can see it on his screen when he's talking.
Okay,
yeah,
then leave it. It's the same painting with the 2 women holding the child, right? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So we have actually, if I maximize this, can you still see it? Do you see that? And now it doesn't have the YouTube stuff? Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, so we have these 2 images that Peterson was talking about. So we have the idea of then, why is it that the Jewish culture did so well? And then we thought about, okay, well, let's think about the cultures that didn't do so well. And the first ones that came to mind actually were the, how do I show my, okay. Let's jump back. And then, so the first ones that came to mind was the Sentinelese people based in the Andaman Islands. So this is India. on the left, and then Andaman Islands on the right, there near below Burma or Myanmar, and then west of Thailand. So these people are actually seems to be the longest uncontacted people. So they're still in the Stone Age, and they're incredibly hostile to visitors. It's an interesting read actually about these people, and then the contacts that have happened to them with the Adamese. So they're still Stone people or Stone Age people, and then you also have the Australian Aboriginal people, which were also uncontacted for a while, and then like both of them, the tools or the extent of society was still tribal based, small tribes, and then the tools were sticks and stones, and then maybe some. I'm not sure whether either practices trapping or not, but we're not talking Bronze Age at all. So we think about this, and it's like, well, why did these ones do so well? And one of the things that seems to be is in tribalistic societies, the strong men generally get the women, or the men just take the women. It doesn't seem like the women actually pick the men. I could be completely wrong on that, but at least that's the working theory. But then we think about it, well, what if the women actually pick the men? And then you have the idea of the animus, which is when the man sees the woman, he doesn't just see the woman as she is, but he also sees the image of everything that she could be. So then we get taken now to this image. So we think about this in terms of, so to then decipher this, the one on the right is easier to explain. So it's a symbol of an egg with then the mother holding the egg, and the mother's also wearing the crown. So we can assume the crown to be like society or kingdom or yeah, I guess society would be a good one. But the boy is already trying to climb out of the egg. Now outside the egg, you have the underworld, you have mortality and wars, and also culture. There's someone with an instrument. Actually, it seems like it's actually like an orchestra, but there's people with wings, and it doesn't seem that too pretty. But even inside the egg, you can see the serpent. So she's standing on top of the serpent, which is screaming. And there's also a half moon crescent, which is a symbol of new beginnings. So the cyclic nature of new beginnings. So it's kind of like safe within the egg, but even within the egg, you still have the serpent, and there's new time to come, and the baby's eventually going to climb out and into the unknown. But the mother is kind of holding the baby close. Maybe the mother doesn't actually want the baby to experience the hardship of the unknown. Now we go to the image on the left, and we can see here that I guess the mother figure is holding up the baby high, and the mother is looking down to the man. So the man is underneath the woman, kind of either she's kind of stepping on him, I guess, but you can see just behind the man is the eyes of like a monster, but it's also the half moon crescent. And then where the man's pelvis would be, you see the underworld with the serpent or the dragon. And then, so what you could probably take from this, but in the one where the image on the right is symbol of an egg, the one on the left, it just screams out to be a vagina to me. So the golden area, which is gild, seems like the labia, as well as the crown up the top seems to be the clitoris. And that seems to be fairly fitting. But if we take this then from the gender roles perspective, right, like the man who is then above, the man's pelvis is in the underworld. And I think this would then be fairly self-explained, because the man who is ruled by his penis isn't going to a man who innovates. He's just going to be a womanizer who just claims the woman he wants and then competes violently with the men who takes it, or just accepts his place as a weak male. So it's not a good place to be. But then the man who is able to align himself with above the underworld, but he's also the image of the man which is above the underworld is also a monster, but it seems to be a controlled monster, because the monster, the dragon below is a symbol of chaos with the water, but the one below is near his head. So it seems like it's the controlled monster. So the woman has now accepted the man who has controlled his monster, but she's still wary a little bit, or at least not wary of him, but she's trying to protect the baby from the monstrous qualities of also the father. Now, eventually, the baby will grow up into a child, and you can see all the children here grounded on earth, or they're standing instead of held out in levitation by the mother, or they're not in the underworld. So they're still looking towards the ideal of where the crown is. So the crown would be the clitoris, which is this great image of society. But then the kids are like the boy on the right actually has his taught, his shoulder, the shirt's shoulder torn as well, and he's kneeling. So he seems to be a little bit closer to the underworld, when the other ones are still very much, they're all looking towards the ideal. So it seems then you would think, well, the man who has to compete for a woman is going to be then needing to innovate to be able to get the woman. And he kind of lives then for the conquest of the woman, then also for then the protection of the child. I think it seems I explained it a little bit better in the discussion, but I think that communicates as well enough. So then, yep.
No, that was pretty much about the same as you actually went a little bit further on this too than last time. So yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so then when we think about it, okay, maybe the Jewish culture then was the first culture where the women started judging the men, and actually telling them, you can't just rape us and you can't just use your pelvis to get us. You actually now need to start invading boys. And then once you start innovating, you start controlling your monster, then you get a chance at reproduction. But then even there's still the fear of the man, the monstrous qualities of the man. So the child is still in complete innocence. And I think that for the child is held up in the heavens with these childlike angels holding the crown, because then it's the child's innocence as well as potential. And then as they get more grounded in the earth, then, you know, their innocence as well as the potential starts diminishing. But they still keep an eye on the ideals. When this man, he's actually the only one not looking up to the ideal, but maybe it's because he's holding on to the woman as the thing that actually keeps him rounded there, or grounded. Alrighty, so let me jump back into this Hangout. I think this is stop the broadcast, right? Okay, no, it's up there. Alrighty.
There you go.
Okay, yep, so that was the first point. A second point, completely unrelated to anything, but we're thinking about then the Weinstein issue. I think it was Harvey Weinstein was the Hollywood one, who there was a scandal about. So then we thought about this, which is, well, the women involved in that, like, apparently there was a few rapes, but most of the things weren't, they were done consensually. So it was this thing of, you do this, you get the job. So it was a consensual contract, but then it would be under the realm of prostitution, which is you're selling your body for a promotion, or you're selling your body for the job, which is the terms of prostitution. It's not the terms of rape. Now that controversial thing is out the way, the next point is the lower class is dominated.
Just brush right over that real quick.
Are you saying it is concluded? Are you implying that it was concluded, that this is the outcome? Because it was not concluded.
I think some people had some hesitations.
No,
some people had some hesitations.
Then, John, I ended the discussion saying that, okay, we'll resume it some other day and kind of finish it. It was not concluded.
I can see your... I can see how you kind of come to that conclusion, but I still think that you're kind of generalizing these things down into the most simplified version when there's still a lot more, because it's not like...
Well, so there is the different question, which is that okay? Right, but the categorizations of the perceived crime needs to be important. but then there is still the question of, is it okay? And that seems to be where the contestants mostly were. Is that type of prostitution actually okay in the workplace environment? But then we had a discussion about, well, how else do you make a decision when there's 100 equal candidates which are objectively qualified? And then it comes down to a subjective decision. And there was the discussion about like businesses will also fine dine the clients to be able to get the contracts as well when it goes through a bidding process. But then there's the argument, which is, well, should this be regulated by government where you're not allowed to do prostitution in the workplace like that? Or should it be a libertarian society where that's fine, you just let the free market decide? But I think the big issue about this was it was kept secret. Well, it wasn't really kept secret to the people particularly involved, because all of Hollywood knew about this, apparently. They all knew which directors you had to sleep with and which directors didn't do that. So it seems like there was some level of transparency, but it wasn't a public transparency. And that seems to be where it's a little bit dodgy, because if there wasn't any complete transparency, then it seems like it's using a technique of deception or of perceived shame that you are already doing something dishonorable, and that's why you're not even going public about it. But then even still, then there's the argument of, well, how do you still make a decision when there's 100 equally qualified candidates? But I think if you then rule, because then you have the argument as, well, maybe the prostitution is then a way of then finding out who is the most committed person. Because the commitment would actually be an important factor when it comes to acting. You find out the actress which is most committed, and that would be one way of finding out whether they're most committed. You could do another one, which is, well, whoever can go through this, can survive on Survivor for a month on an island, that would be the person most committed. So there's probably like, and you can make a TV show out of that. Like the person who wins Survivor gets to then be in the movie. And then you can make a little production of it. But then there's the other idea, which is, well, maybe you should just randomly draw hats. But then you don't have the commitment argument there. But then maybe that is a bit better. But it seems the best option is then if you had and it would even win in the free market capitalism, which would be the idea of, we're not going to do that option, but instead we're just going to try and improve the objective criteria. So we narrow down those 100 candidates by introducing more objective criteria to actually figure out who is the best, rather than remaining in the subjective realm for making that decision. And then it actually led on to like a free will discussion, which is, well, if you then if you can make such predictions and they're no longer subjective, then does that actually mean you have free will? Because if we then define free will as, if we know everything about you, then we should be able to predict your actions. So if we know all the stuff to then make better objective decisions about, which of these candidates will be able to perform the best, perform best in the movie and then bring in most results and everything like that for the movie, then are you going to, does that person actually still have any free will? Because it seems like that's really pressing in to the fabrics of freedom or of reality, or what is it? I don't know, of free will. All right, I'll hand it back to you, John, for your argument against me.
All right.
So now that I stated my position.
I just want to clarify your position, because your term prostitution it's easy to think of it in the way that it's normally used, but it's kind of stripped down from that label. It's just the exchange of actions for it's a mutual exchange of actions, or a mutual exchange of things that are of value to these two different people. So that's kind of it's not prostitution through money. It's the man is giving a specific job, and the woman is giving a specific pleasure to the man. So that's kind of the mutual exchange. And so we as a kind of society need to decide whether or not we want to allow that type of behavior to be to occur in a workplace where we are hopefully trying to find the most suited for the job, as opposed to the one that is most likely to make the person that they're working with get their own kind of pleasure out of this situation. And it's funny that we're discussing it, especially so soon after Jordan Peterson's Vice interview, where he brings up kind of this exact dilemma that we're in, where how far are we going to be willing to let, women are in the same workplaces as men, and so how much freedom do we want to give them as to what they can do to excel their career? Do we want to allow them to be provocative and to try to seduce the person above them in order to get a better pay raise? Is that something that we want to allow, or is that something that we don't want to, because there's certain women that will not want to act in that same specific way, and so then they wouldn't be because of that kind of two different types of people that are trying to get ahead of each other, then certain people aren't going to be treated fairly. And so that I think that's what his point was during that interview, is to bring the question forward so that we can figure out what it is that we're supposed to be doing and what we're all agreeing on what we're going to be doing. So that's the kind of thing is the Harvey Weinstein thing, is this was all happening behind closed doors, where the only very few people were involved with the situation. And we need to now realize, okay, do we want to let that type of thing happen more often, or do we want that to happen at all?
Yeah, I think the idea of very few people is an understatement. It was outside the public's consciousness, but it was definitely within Hollywood's consciousness. Yeah. So everything you said, I agree with. For the Peterson interview with Vice, to just go a little bit further on that, the question was particularly, Peterson said the statement, which is, we don't yet know the rules of the game. We don't yet know whether women in the workplace was a good idea yet. It's only been 40 years. This is still an experiment that we don't know the outcome or the result yet. And we need to establish clear rules. And then the makeup situation was used as then an illustration of women using exploiting biological responses inside men to then treat them more favorably. Sumit, I remember, then said, well, that has the opposite effect in India. Wearing makeup to work is actually frowned upon, it seems, if I remember correctly, Sumit.
I wouldn't say in general, but in certain places, because people are like, okay, we are here to work.
Yeah. Cool. And for the other thing about the sleeping with the jobs, that's an interest. I
don't want to rule out the no makeup thing automatically, just because there are two very clear differences when there's the men that are working and there's women that are working, because the men have certain men have more narrow-sightedness with how committed they'll be towards a job, and they all also are on average more disagreeable than women, and so there will be more willing to fight for getting a certain raise, whereas a woman may not be as forthright with her own salary. And so this is kind of, is this some sort of level playing field situation where women, if they have that want to excel in the workplace without being disagreeable, this is kind of some sort of method that they can go about to do that. But again, that we're still not sure if that's what we want to reward. Is that the kind of behavior that we want to continue on?
Well, it's. I mean, like, there's probably a billion questions that still need to be answered, right? Because, for instance, removing makeup, then that would unfairly punish people which have biologically uglier faces. So makeup is then a way for them to actually compete with more biologically attractive females. So it's actually something that could even the playing field when the women are doing it. But then techniques such as, doing blush or lipstick and things like that, and those are techniques used to exploit the sexual, because they're induced during orgasm, your cheeks will blush and your lips will go red. So then that's why that's quite there, which is it's also a technique to exploit those responses inside men. So then there is the argument, which is, well, makeup could actually make the uglier women, biologically uglier women, then be able to compete with the biologically prettier women. But then you also have the instance, which is, well, now that men and women are working together and you then regulate the makeup or something, then you also regulate what the men wear. Should the men no longer wear like custom tailored $100,000 suits or whatever, $10,000 suits? Because those are also going to be sexual markers that also, or just even markers in general, that also enhance the male's performance. And also can make them a target then for women wanting to then exploit the man for their own promotion. So
here's a totalitarian solution. Just segregate the sexes. So there's a female business and a male business. Yeah. Only males in this business, only females in that business.
Yeah, like making women nurses and then making men doctors. It seems a fairly interesting thing, but even
well, there's already certain kind of female only law firms where they'll only hire women, exactly, and I originally, when I learned about this type of thing, I was kind of like, that's not fair, but maybe it's smarter than the current process. Maybe, I don't know.
The problem though is you can have a women-only company, but then if you had a man-only company, then for some reason that's a problem. And it's an issue that needs to be addressed. So there was a issue somewhere where this happened in a university. There was a women-only space or spaces inside this university, and then I think it was, gosh, what was it? There's like some activism group in the USA that does all this stuff to maintain free speech and student rights and whatnot. Campus Reform. So I think Campus Reform then organized a protest, and they actually got it so that they said that was discrimination against men, and then you need to be able, if you're going to have female-only spaces, you also need male-only spaces too.
No. But I don't know. These are all topics that are still kind of up in the air. We haven't really gotten to any exact solutions that we can test out yet. But it's an intriguing topic that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, well, a progressive society is going to march blindly in the way of what they perceive to be progress, and sometimes progress is regress, and horrific regress. So, this is the fate that is happening, and it also seems to be a reason why we're importing Islam as an antidote to going a little bit too far, it seems. And Peterson, I think he talked about this in a clip recently. I can't remember which thing it was, but it was the idea that, it was in the Mike or MIC slander video of him, or the attempted slander, because it just looked comedic at the end, where Peterson was then saying how, if you push dominate, what was it? If you just only aim for fairness in everything, then you push the desire for domination underground. And then that's going to manifest itself in stories like 50 Shades of Grey or BDSM and things like that. And even with BDSM, you look into that, and then it's the people who are domineering in, like overwhelmingly domineering in the workplace, and then overwhelmingly submissive in their sexual life when it comes to BDSM practices. And then the people who are completely submissive in their work life like to be domineering. Again, this makes complete sense, right? Because as you know, if you're always making the decisions in your workplace, and it will be tiring, and you just want to be able to retreat into a place where for finally you don't have to make a decision, and that's okay. And then sex is like the perfect point of vulnerability. Like you can't really, at least I don't know, I found, and it seems to be a general rule of sex, which is you can't have great sex unless both people are vulnerable with each other. Because, you know, sex is the thing where you expose all your weaknesses to the other person. They can kill you at any time. And even like the idea of like sleeping next to somebody, then you can always strangle them with a pillow. So it's an idea of you only do it when you can trust the other person. And then obviously, if you then do that without trust of the other person, then you're going to have a lot more regrets. Which shouldn't be any surprise to somebody, but for some strange reason, that is surprising to some people. So, all right. So the next one is, oh, Sumit, do you have anything?
Yeah. We are not done, Ben. I'm seeing a couple of things here, Ben. The first one is, when you say that this experiment of women at the workplace has only been tried for 40 years or something, like you're saying.
I didn't just say that. That was in the Vice Peterson interview, and this is
okay.
So,
yeah. So
yeah.
What I'm asking is, what does it matter if it was a good thing or bad thing? I mean, if they say that we want to work, then they want to work. If they don't want to work, then they don't want to work. Like an individual wanting something should be enough, right? So this whole question of whether it was a good thing or bad thing arises, but that is a secondary question, right? Yep. Another thing I don't seem to understand is I've been working in India for 5 years, right? In my experience, I have not seen this. Like managers normally promote people who are competent. And if there was something sinister going on, then people would be outraged. They would kind of self-regulate.
Well, they should promote people which are competent. Otherwise, the business isn't going to be able to compete. And this is one of the arguments against affirmative action, because you're promoting people who aren't competent just based on their identity. And then are you really going to be able to compete?
Not only that, if something like that is going on, like you were saying, prostitution, so people would find out about it and people would be outraged, and it just wouldn't last for long. And the thing is, there is no way you can talk about what should be done or what should be regulated, but in my opinion, it cannot be regulated. People will do what they will do. Like they will do whatever it is that they will do in the free time. Maybe they will meet outside work or do something. So the solution has to be at the level of the individuals who are part of the system. And when the system is working properly, these kind of things wouldn't happen, right? And I feel like perhaps partly this concern comes up when we no longer trust men to do the right thing. We perhaps have given them questioned power. Like when you say that they will be able to use their sexuality to get a promotion. So right, but do we not trust men to kind of be strong enough to say this is wrong and will not do it? So what I'm saying is I see that like maybe in the West you have all these scandals propping up, so maybe men have gone in that direction where they get away with it. And but if the system was working properly, I think it also has something to do with political correctness, because when all this stuff was going on, why didn't people speak up? Even at the news organizations, right? There were many these anchors, famous anchors, who were doing
Well, you're also not going to speak up if you benefited from the situation.
Right, but there are other people in the system. They didn't even speak up. So to me, it's that whole structure is kind of in a way corrupt, and I do believe that this happens in India as well, where people say, okay, the electricity went out, like I keep saying, or there is garbage on the streets, or there is this problem, there is that problem, and it's the fault of the politicians. But it's not just the fault of the politicians. People don't hold them accountable enough. They don't. They themselves don't take the steps to fix things. So they themselves are engaging in these selfish activities without getting concerned for the larger impact. They stand for the national anthem, but and then they go home. I mean, their sense of nationalism is not necessarily related to them doing things that will improve the state of the country. So and it makes so much sense when Peterson says in order for the for example, in Hitler's Germany, right? So in order for him to pull off what he pulled off, every individual had to be corrupted at a certain level in order for them to get away with something like that. So there are a lot of questions like what was the HR doing? What were other co-workers doing? Were they not saying it? So what I'm saying is, I don't believe these problems are that they are complicated, but that's why we have this complicated system, which have all these different people. And if all of them were to be doing their jobs, I would say it will just get self-regulated.
Okay.
It's not going to be self-regulated unless there are. Okay, so in order to get somebody to do something that's right, you have to motivate them in a way that is going to be more beneficial for themselves than it would be than if they were to do something else that is wrong. So the reason that these types of things are occurring is because it's currently more beneficial for the people in the situations to do, like in Nazi Germany, it was quite beneficial for the people there at the time to take on larger responsibilities, including sending off Jews to the concentration camps. You have to be very deliberate in what behavior you're rewarding and how, and people are being rewarded by certain behaviors, and you have to be sure to negatively to give out certain consequences for behavior that you do not want to propagate. So it's just like one of his rules in his book is don't let your children do anything that that makes you dislike them. That's a great rule to have for a country and its inhabitants, is to set up a way for the inhabitants to kind of flourish in a way that isn't a detriment to the entire society or to the country's moral values or the people's moral values, if it has any.
Cool. Your question, you posed one question and then you posed another question and then it went on for a bit and I forgot exactly my counter arguments to them. I was ready with my counter arguments and then it went
to Sumit or for myself.
No, to Sumit.
Okay. Oh, there you go again. Okay.
You're fired. You're fired, John.
My response to John is that I was talking more about the people who are part of the system other than the ones who are corrupt. What the F are they doing?
Okay, you're assuming that there's a specific variant of people that are automatically corrupt. The reason that they're corrupt is because they're normal people that have taken an action that has rewarded them in a certain way, more so than had they taken a different action. And so that's what corrupted them. And so they'll continue on that cycle until some sort of something intrudes on that cycle, and it turns their behavior into a negative outcome for themselves. That's you can't just say that everybody in Nazi Germany was corrupt, continued on that way. There were normal people that happened to find a pathway that was more beneficial for themselves than if they were to not go on that path. And so that's what morality has to be, is to be willing to take on be willing to take on certain actions, even when when you take on those actions, it's a negative outcome for yourself. That's what morality kind of has to be.
Yeah.
In order to not get these types of situations, as in communist Russia or Maoist China or Nazi Germany.
Yeah. So there's a study. Let me run with what Jordan said.
Let go, man, go.
So there's a study that was done where if you observe someone cheating and they don't get punished, then you're going to also be more likely to cheat. And then when it's like something like 30% of the of your peers are also cheating, then it's pretty much like there needs to be a cull that occurs, because otherwise it's too late, kind of thing. And
just a quick just in addition to that, sorry, and that's kind of why the matter of free will or not free will has any effect, because our kind of system that we have in place creates negative consequences for people, so that even if they don't have free will, then they're not going to choose the negative consequence upon themselves.
No. And then you can ask, well, why is this? Why do they cheat? No, it's fine. So why do they cheat? And then but then you have the situation, which is, and as you explained, but to take it a bit further, which is, well, if you're in a society, or let's say you're in a company and then people are cheating or whatever, but let's say you don't know that these things eventually get punished. Let's say it's not illegal, or let's say you don't know that there's any spiritual or religious guideline for why this will eventually harm you in the future. Then it's like, well, this is what everyone's doing. This is what I need to do to get ahead. This is what everyone else is doing. This is what needs to be done. Right. So then it's just like, another hurdle to climb over in the toughness of life. But when there is actually like a religious rule about that, or there is a societal rule about that, that then casts negative judgment on that, then it then enhances the person with a perception that if I do this, then eventually I will get punished. But if you don't have that judgment put on that action, then there isn't any thing on this. Now, I'm not sure if you wanted to counter to that, but I have two other points that I did write down from when you were providing your two questions, Sumit.
No, go ahead with your two things.
So one of the big things about the sleeping with the bosses was this happening with Gamergate. This is the thing that Gamergate exposed, which was, it turned out this particular individual, she was sleeping with pretty much everybody to get her stories published and to get positive reviews on her games. And it actually turned out that this was quite common throughout game journalism. Women were sleeping around to get promotions or to get the games reviewed better. And then Mr. Medical, Milo Yiannopoulos, Sagan of Akkad, these people broke the story along with a really good blog post, but I'll leave that for people to find themselves, which just recounts this entire history of what this psychopath did over about a year, the woman sleeping with everybody, and how she deceived and lied to everybody. And also how other men also deceived and lied to promote this behavior. And then it came out, and then the narrative was, you're attacking women. How dare you be against female empowerment and female choices? And it got really pushed under the rug. instead, and that's kind of shit. So, and then the only other argument is it seems like your questions came from a bit of a stance of liberalism, which is, well, if people consent to it, then should there be any negative judgment towards it? And you could also say the same thing, like, for certain drugs, like say crystal meth, this is a drug which is, you do it once and you're fucked for the rest of your life. So there's certain things which is like, at some point there's a conservative argument, like the liberal argument you can then say is like, I'll do whatever I want, no matter if it's good or bad for society, because otherwise you're oppressing or repressing or suppressing me, you damn society. But then you have the conservative argument, which is I will sacrifice what I want for the benefit of society. So people will take jobs and then work 30 years to provide for their family and their wife, even if they don't particularly like that job. And they're the ones who do like garbage work or, do the hard labor jobs, especially. And then men are a bit more, maybe a bit more conservative than women, but I'm not particularly sure that is correct. But actually, that's probably not correct at all, because that exact correlation was based on agreeable, because liberalism is high agreeableness and low conscientiousness, and then conservatism was high conscientiousness and then low openness. No, sorry. Liberalism, when I say liberalism, I actually meant it's high openness and low conscientiousness, I think. And then the political correct one was also high agreeableness. So it's liberal, but then also high agreeableness. So for the crystal meth thing, like, if we just say, okay, let's make crystal meth legal, then this is going to, there doesn't seem to be any argument for why that is a good idea for society's benefit, besides you get to permanently screw up some people for the rest of the life, which are now going to depend on taxpayer money. It's just like, it's just not a benefit to taxpayers.
Also, since, I don't know, the workplace, you can kind of define it down to essentially like a game that all of the employees are continually playing. Just like how in cycling, we all kind of agree upon the rules. Okay, this is a match to see how far you can cycle without any outside kind of drug influences on your body. That's out of the rules. That's not allowed in this game that we're playing. If you want to make a different game, you can do that. Have the drug cycling where you can see how doped up you can be and then just go crazy at it. But for this game that we're playing right here, we've all agreed no extraneous drugs that are going to be taken, and that's part of the rules for this game. Just like you need to set those rules at a workplace where, okay, this isn't a game to find out who can sleep their way to the top. That's a different game. That if you want to play that, you can go create a different.
The Weinstein Company.
Who's the most? Who is the most involved? This is fine. Huh?
There was a delay in the
meritocracy
audio.
in this field.
Sorry.
Okay. So in a business, it's essentially a game to figure out who is most capable in this specific field, not in other fields. That's what it is. It's kind of like throwing out, okay, we're not trying to figure out who can lay the best. This is a field to find out who can be the best lawyer without cheating. And so that's kind of the rules that everyone sets forward when they become hired for a specific job. If it's like for the Gamergate situation, we're trying to find out which games are the best, not which game developers are able to kind of make it seem like their game is the best. That's a different game that we're not playing. And so with the complete libertarian argument, then people can go into a specific game that everybody else is already playing, but play by different rules, play by their own rules. And so that the libertarian argument, I guess would be everybody in that game now has to leave the game. Maybe they can't shame the person that's kind of entered their realm and is cheating. They have to just allow that person to kind of get to the top. And so you need to very specifically set what rules are inside each of these games that we're playing. And that includes making, that includes figuring out and realizing that specific men are much better at arguing for their own pay rise. And so you got to take that into account when you're hiring women to know, okay, maybe anytime a male of her same caliber is able to argue for his own pay rise, maybe she also gets her pay rise to the same level as him. It depends on what game you're wanting to play, because if it's a game on let's see who can argue for their best pay rise, then maybe that's the game that everybody agrees on.
So to just
hire the most that you can.
Wow, there's a serious delay with the audio. I'm sorry for interrupting you, John.
Oh, okay. I had finished. It's just basing it down. You have to set the rules for whatever game that you're playing, whatever business that you have, so that you know when people are cheating or not, and whether they should be punished or not.
Yeah. So then to go to a workplace, I think Sumit's one of those questions was, well, if the women want to work, then why not let them? And then you have the argument, well, we don't yet know how that impacts the game. And right now we're conducting this experiment, but we don't yet know how it is completely impacting the game. There's still things which are completely unknown. So we're currently working through the sexual harassment. We're currently working through the prostitution angles. We're also working through like the fact that if a man talks confrontational or disagreeable to a woman, then it's also viewed as threatening. But if a woman does it to the man, then it could also be viewed as bossy. So there's also, those things which also need to be worked out. But then you also have a situation which was in the movie, the Red Pill documentary, where an engineer asked a female engineer if like that. Well, he didn't know whether she was a female engineer. He just met her in the office, and then he was going to explain a complex engineering problem. So he wanted to ask her, is she an engineer, to then find out the level of complexity that he needed to use to explain the problem. And then he got a negative performance review, and then eventually let go from the company because it was viewed as a idea of, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know. It's whatever the SJWs are calling it these days. Or compassion tyrants, I should say.
Sexual discrimination, perhaps?
Yeah, but maybe they view it as sexual discrimination rather than just, but it's like, I don't know, is there, which wasn't his intent, right? Yeah, because it's like, you want to find out the thing. So it's like, it's not based on the gender at all. But then you would even say, well, even if it was based on the gender, is that actually an issue? Because there's still more male engineers than female engineers. So is it wrong to make that generalization? And then you would have some people who say, well, it is wrong because that's one of the stereotypes that is preventing female engineers to be able to get into the workforce. So, yeah. I mean, it's complex. Sumit, I'll hand it over to you, and I'll just
again,
fill up my water bottle a little bit.
You people are talking like a bunch of tyrants, and it's a libertarian position to let people do what they want to do, right? I mean, who is anyone to feel? I mean, there are problems, obviously, like you're saying, there can be problems, but that's to me, that's not to say that they shouldn't. I mean, I think I might be misunderstanding what you are saying.
Okay.
From your talk, it seems like, do they need somebody's permission to work somewhere? I don't think they should. Are you using this as to say that this is an experiment?
I'll jump on before you spend 10 minutes and I forget my argument. So the bit about this is like, okay, then it's like, well, what's the consequence, kind of thing, and it's like, well, there's unknown consequences. So let's take the crystal meth issue, right? Like, okay, sure, if they want to do it, then it's their life. Let them fuck it up. But the thing is, it comes back to taxpayers. So that dude who then decides to do the liberal argument to then take crystal meth is then oppressing every single taxpayer to then make them have to pay tax for his treatment. Otherwise, you just let him suffer. And that's my argument, which is, if you want to screw up your life, then it's on you. You're going to be the bad example, and I'll let you suffer. But if you're generally wanting, like, it's the same thing. Like, if you're obese, maybe we shouldn't actually provide that much healthcare for you. Provide less, because it's like, okay, we can either divert a ton of taxpayer money to you, or you can stop eating as much. So one actually doesn't oppress every other bloody taxpayer at gunpoint to then pay for your treatment. But then, if you're, it's like life and death is like a bit of a different situation. But then life and death also is good, because then we get better at being able to treat death, which is good. But then getting better at being able to treat obesity, is this really something that we should be devoting taxpayer money to, or should people just be eating less and then stop oppressing people who are actually eating healthy and actually want to be good citizens of the country and be able to actually run without panting for breath and having a heart attack?
Ben, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, so
go ahead.
Yeah, the liberal argument is that anybody can do whatever it is that they feel like, as long as it doesn't impose on anybody else's free will to do what they would like to do.
That's
like,
a libertarian argument. I thought that was a libertarian.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. The libertarian argument. Then, when you're in a business and you're kind of playing by those rules, that anybody, as long as it doesn't impose the ability to do that as well. If you're, I'm going to go back to the cycling metaphor just because it's a little bit easier and the rules are a little bit more enforced and well enforced. The individual is allowed to take as many drugs as whatever they want, as long as they're not in the game that they're supposed to be playing. Because when they take as many performance enhancing drugs in the game, that's also limiting everybody else in the game, because their intention was to play fair. Their intention was to do as best as they can by themselves. And so it's like, if you're taking all these drugs for the game, then you're kind of taking away the free rights of the other people in the game.
I think the cycling argument doesn't apply well, because you're talking about cheaters of the game. When what you're trying to be countering is the argument that should women work, right? So no, but that's the thing that Sumit positioned, which is like, we're not talking about like, it fits for the prostitution argument, but it doesn't fit for the idea that, well, should women be able to work? Because then the idea was, well, we don't know the rules. Is this actually a good idea, kind of thing? And then it's like, well, should we just not let women work? And no one's not
let women work with men.
Yeah.
That's the.
That's correct.
Yeah. So you are not saying
if you want to be tyrannical, that's what you can do.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you people are saying, oh, this is a kind of an experiment. We don't know what the rules are. Maybe it is
No, but it certainly is an experiment. We don't know what the rules are, but it still seems to be an experiment that is worth running, because then we can figure it out. But then, that's going to be quite in doubt at sometimes, because when you see the regression, it's very easy to then fall into a radical position to be like, fuck it, fire all the women. And like, some companies actually do this, where they don't hire women now because they're too concerned about hiring an SJW, and then devoting resources now to all this SJW drama rather than competing in the workforce.
Okay. I got what you're saying. I wanted your clarification on something. Again, this is one of those things that just my mind is spinning right now. You're talking about Gamergate, right? Gamergate.
Yep.
I skimmed through Wikipedia and other places. They make it sound like that. They make it sound like something else. Listen to this. The Gamergate controversy concerns issues of sexism and progressivism in video game culture stemming from harassment campaign conducted primarily through the use of hashtag Gamergate, another website. Gamergate is a leading what was that? Yeah, Gamergate refers to online backslash against perceived breaches of journalistic integrity on video game news sites. So they make it sound like you people are trying to attack women and you are perceiving.
What you people. I wasn't involved in Gamergate at the time, but I know the arguments.
Sympathetic to them.
No. Like I am sympathetic to them. Like the Gamergate, the people who called for the thing against it. Like so. This was like it's a complex issue, but this was like the thing that started the alertness of what an SJW was in modern parlor. Like this was the thing that made Milo Yiannopoulos famous. This is the thing that made Saga Nakar like the YouTube anti-SJW community. So what it did was it actually exposed that the journalists and the people controlling even the new media are incredibly biased in the reporting of events. And the same thing that just happened with Channel 4 interview. Peterson then says things like it is or presents some good arguments or whatever. And then the defense then was, look at all Peterson's followers harassing this innocent woman, or she's just trying to do her job. And then Peterson is like, wait, let's look into the actual harassment. There was a lot of criticisms. There was some things that were vitriolic, but was any of it actually harassment? And then this is one of the techniques that is then played, which is if you just say, like, if you just correct a woman by yourself, that's an issue because that woman receives thousands of other corrections. So you're part of the problem. But then the argument is, well, if thousands of people are correcting you, then maybe you're the problem, right? It's not the other thousands of people correcting you. And maybe they're not actually harassing you, which if you look at harassment, then it's sustained harassment over a period of time. And harassment is an indictment against an individual. You can't take a group who like all sent one little tweet together to be punished. But if they do say, you know, we're going to rape you, then that individual is saying and doing a threat. But if, you know, you get thousands of people correcting this one woman, then there's not a legal case. However, SJWs are trying to make that a legal case. The Gamergate thing is really a thing, but okay, if you want to like get the starting of what kicked it all off, there was what's the website that's
Kotaku? Was it Kotaku?
Yeah, so Kotaku was it, but it was about I think the thing may actually be down, but it was like the lady who was the one who slept with everybody was called Zoe Quinn, and there was a blog post that was written by her boyfriend at the time, who she continuously lied to and then said she wasn't sleeping with people. So that blog post kicked off like the whole exposition. And then it was funny because the guy was just like, this really sucks. People should know this person is a psychopath. But then the gamers read it and they were like, who cares whether or not she's a psychopath? We care about them lying about video game reviews. So then people started attacking the journalists and starting like attacking her, like, what the fuck? Like, you guys shouldn't be doing this. And then they said, how can you go at a woman? You harassing her. And that's
stop slut shaming her.
Yeah. And la da da da. So, and then that's where Milo, so a guy called Mr. Medical, he used a different alias at the time, Instant Aristocrat. So he saw this like little blog post or whatever, and then, and he like broke the story to like the masses at that time. And then Milo Yiannopoulos and Saga Nakar and these other people saw it at the time. They were enthusiastic, and you go back and there's like a little interview of this timid and shy Milo Yiannopoulos interviewing the famous internet aristocrat, and how times have changed. So Internet Aristocrat, he ended up deciding, he actually got doxxed. his girlfriend actually got doxxed, and there was another issue as well. He got drunk and he had some sexual moments with his girlfriend live on stream, but he ended up getting doxxed, and then he deleted his channel and everything. So these videos are archived on archive channels on YouTube. But he said before he deleted his channel, he said, "We lost the Gamergate war," and we, you know, it's horrific. Like, we didn't win, and you know, this battle. And he's right. Like, the battle is still ongoing. You have like the Red Pill documentary, which just talks about, you know, how men are treated through society's image. You have like Karen Strawman was another person who came out and talked about this at the time. It's really interesting.
But the media seems to be not saying what you are saying.
Yeah,
Crazy,
but that's the entire argument, right? Like, I mean, that's why Gamergate was such a thing. It was like when people finally realized the media actually had a narrative. So Milo Yiannopoulos, being a journalist, he exposed the story, which is they actually all had he was a gaming journalist at the time. And he was part of a forum, like an internal discussion board, which they were, all the gaming journalist websites actually had this this forum pushing political stories, like political ideologies, and then talking through them through this forum. So then trying to do a coordinated effort to then try and make these gamers less of these misogynistic neckbeard gamers, and instead more accepting of the feminist movement.
It's strange because Wikipedia makes it look like the exact opposite thing. I mean, the Wikipedia.
You eventually discover Wikipedia cites anything which a whole bunch of other newspapers and academia papers say. They don't particularly cite things that are, you know, as long as it gets news coverage and as long as it gets papers published, then Wikipedia will consider it to be okay. And so that's the thing, which is if you invade academia with regressive leftists, and then you invade the media with regressive leftists, then suddenly Wikipedia has a whole bunch of data that it needs to be unbiased and follow the Wikipedia rules. Like, the Wikipedia rules are fine, but then it's just like popularity of what it considers to be reliable sources is its main criteria. And then unreliable sources such as Breitbart, how could they be so biased? Then get put under the rug. It's just controversy. So you can have like a theory, like all these feminist theories, and they get a Wikipedia page as if they are completely true.
It is strange because you are just not exposed to the other side of the information. I mean, most people don't know this shit is going on.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a troll version of Wikipedia that came up when I searched for Zoe Quinn called, and it's one I found before. So if you want like the complete opposite of what Wikipedia could be in terms of like right-leaning and trolly, then it's Encyclopedia Dramatica. If you've ever, yeah, Encyclopedia Dramatica. If you ever want to like see the complete other side of stuff, then that's the other website. So I shared. Yeah, it's.
I think we kind of got off topic a bit.
No,
yeah.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back to the topic. I do have something to add to that sexual things. I think partly it might have something to do with the integrity of marriage and fidelity, and how the lack of that and corruption of that thing can lead to these issues. Because if I'm a man and I'm married, and if I believe in fidelity, then obviously I wouldn't do all this crazy shit of sleeping around with other women and this whole corruption of prostitution and stuff. So and promoting people with whom you have that kind of relationship. So so if that thing was to be still there in the West, so this obviously wouldn't be happening, right? I mean, it would be happening, but if people took that seriously, then how can you do this if you take this seriously?
Well, they
John,
don't
do you
take
wanna
it seriously. Well, it's exactly that. They don't take it seriously. They don't take anything seriously, and so these are all side effects of that core issue, or perhaps a core issue behind that as well. But anyway.
I mean, that's one of the things that put Peterson on the map, which is, he's just like, there's all these people who are influenced by postmodernism, nihilism, and then cultural Marxism, all separate things, but they generally coincide, not taking things seriously. And the cultural Marxism actually seems an ability. So it's like someone who is just nihilistic, they're just probably going to be useless. But then if you're nihilistic, but you're also a cultural Marxist, then it's like, haha, I have an ideology which I can use to oppress you, you cunt. So I use the swear word because it is actually like, they view the opponents with moral degradation. So then they have
plus you're Australian, so it doesn't have as much impact.
And I'm Australian, so it's completely fine. So at one point, I will read out some emails that I've sent once to the Australian Post Company. That are some very witty emails that I'm quite proud of, but it's out of topic. But yeah, so it's then you actually become dangerous, and you actually can seek to oppress other people. And if you're a psychopath, like it seems, if you read that story that Zoe Quinn's boyfriend posted, and it's just like, yeah, I think only a psychopath would have those traits. Then if you're a psychopath, you can do incredibly well using the platform of the feminist movement as well, and the modern feminist movement, third wave feminism, and then a platform of cultural Marxism. You can really use that to accomplish any means you want, which is what people are seeing. And that's what Peterson was campaigning against. So you had like this undercurrent of people who were disenthused by Gamergate because they kind of lost it. Like journalistic integrity didn't really come back. And then you had YouTube channels starting to do it instead. But then Milo Yiannopoulos actually got famous because then he was like, oh, this isn't just about gaming. This issue is actually societal with female empowerment, where it's starting to go a little bit too far. And then you'll say Karen Strawman and the Honey Badgers talking about it, which is, yeah, like men are really suffering right now. This isn't just about gamers, but these gamers are also suffering because the men, and it's not just gaming men that are suffering. And then Peterson ended up just exploding after that, because there was all this like, and Peterson puts it as well. He's like, why the hell did that happen? And it's just like, well, there was all this, I can't remember what it's called. Like, so you have a forest or bushland, and if you don't burn it every now and then, all this kindle is on the ground. So it's like all this kindle was just waiting there because it never got cleared, it never got resolved. So then suddenly like a match goes off and then burns it. So it's like all this kindle acquired from all these previous issues, and then all that direction is now pointed at Peterson, which is an incredibly qualified man to then represent the plight of men and women in this situation against these psychopathic, parasitical ideologies.
Just to kind of bring it back to the biblical lecture, he has this like slide or a series of slide where, what is it? Geppetto sees the star and then aims towards the star, and then as he's aiming, he'll go one direction and then and then he'll have to make a quick diversion over, and then he'll go forward again. And I see how that's happened specifically for myself, because you were talking about Milo Yiannopoulos. I specifically remember playing Minecraft while listening to him debating some feminist at some college campus, and it was like I gravitated kind of towards Milo for a little bit, and then maybe gravitated towards Gavin McInnes, and then from Gavin McInnes, somewhat towards Ben Shapiro maybe, and then towards Peterson, and then now towards Jonathan Haidt and Jonathan Pageau and Paul Vanderklay and so many other people along with Peterson at this point in time. And like, I'm doing a lot more like reading, trying to kind of connect all these pieces together, and it's leading me, even though I'm taking these kind of diversions between places, it's kind of taking me forward somehow.
Yeah.
Who knows where though?
Yeah, but it's also funny, right? Because the quality of sources are improving over time, right?
Yeah.
As well. So I found the initial post. So it's the zoepost.wordpress.com. So this is the okay. There's a series of things, but and I think that maybe there's a too long didn't read thing, but that's the post that like read through that, and that's the thing that created Gamergate. But the Encyclopedia Dramatica page on Zoe Quinn is it seems like it's a fairly good recounting of all the different issues that have transpired from the complete opposite end of the ability to communicate those issues, because it is going to be very trolly language.
What was the first blog, Ben?
The zoepost.wordpress.com. And then the other one is Encyclopedia Dramatica, and then Zoe Quinn.
Anyway,
this thing, FBI has a document on this. I just downloaded it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's get back to the thing, and let's do the compulsory. Do not harass anybody. Obviously, it's against law. It's a dumb idea. You're a grown adult. This should be obvious. All right. Now that that's out the way.
Crap.
All right. Okay. So, yeah, it's going to take you a few hours to read through that content, or maybe even a week or a month. Okay, so the next thing is the lower class is dominated. So this is the next note from the massive meeting thing. So there was someone also joined, and he was really asking about, well, what happens if you're just surrounded by people who are morally compromised? What do you do? And then a situation actually happened to a friend of mine recently, where she was renting in Sydney, and Sydney, it's like you spend pretty much all your money on rent, and there's more people than I think there are homes, pretty much. Well, obviously there's probably going to be more people.
Okay, you'll have to back up, because you got split up. You had a friend that was asking what you should do if
I got break
your friends are morally compromised.
Yeah, so if you're surrounded, like the people around you, your peers are all morally compromised. But then in Sydney, if you're trying to rent a home, you either have the legal rentals, which cost a lot more, or you have the illegal rentals, but then you're just kind of winging it. Like people could change the contracts on you at any time. Suddenly they need some more money. They demand more money from you. Otherwise they put you on the street, things like that. And it generally seems to arise from, in the lower class, everyone is just trying to stay, with their head above water, and they're willing to kind of do whatever they can to do that. So if you're actually someone of integrity, then you're not going to get opportunities, because people who cheat the system get the opportunities. So it's like, well, what the hell do you do? Do you have integrity and you suffer, or do you just compromise your ideals and then become a monster yourself? So then the idea, it seems, and it's also that there's this idea that the top 1% is dominated by psychopaths, and that's not particularly true. The top 1% is dedicated by people who took on responsibility and was able to hold that responsibility, and they got rewarded for that responsibility. It's the lower class that seems to be dominated by psychopaths, because the lower class can't defend themselves. So the lower class can just hop between different lower class people and then screw them over terrifically. So then you think, okay, well, what's the difference? Like, is anyone who is morally compromised a psychopath? And evidently, no, that's not the case. But there's certainly a fine line between them. And you see that with Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, which is he idealed to be a psychopath, but then he actually tried to do it. And haha, you're not a psychopath. You now have to deal with the guilt. So that didn't work out too well for him. So then you think about this. Is everyone there? Because other people, oh yeah, there. You're just staying still. All right. So then you think, okay, well, the lower class is dominated by psychopaths and wolves. So then you think, okay, the wolves are the people who are morally compromised. They have a bite. They can really hurt. They're a bit on the morally corrupt side. Or it could also be that they're in a system which has corrupted them where they can't get out. So for instance, someone gets like, you know, bit by bit, they then get coerced into participating in the cartel in Mexico, right? So then, you know, they can't escape because they'll get killed. Like, you can't leave. You need to do these jobs, otherwise you'll get killed. But a theme that you see playing out, so that played out in like Better Call Saul, and it's played out in a movie called Sin Nombre, which is that these wolves, these people who are morally compromised, they may still have ideals, but they themselves cannot live up to those ideals. So what will happen is, but when they do see someone of ideals, then they do seem to somewhat try and protect them. So they try and protect their father who is clean, or they try and protect their children who are clean. They don't try and involve their family, which is a bit different than the mafia. The mafia, the family is the mafia kind of thing. When the cartel, I think, is invited through independent people instead. But I could be wrong for that. But like, for instance, you know, the son could be involved in the cartel, and then he tries to involve his parent. But then the Yakuza, as well as the mafia, are just, sorry, he doesn't try and involve his parent. When the Yakuza and the mafia, it's just family business. Like, I don't think you can get independent people in those organizations. So then you have the idea, which is, yeah, they try and protect the people who they consider ideals. And you see this in concentration camps or in jails. So you'll have people in jails who have done horrific things, and then they hear about maybe someone who didn't. So you have psychopaths in jails, but you also have wolves. And sometimes you just have some innocent people who got wrongly accused, or you have someone who is a wolf, but they, because of circumstances, and now those circumstances are gone, and they really want to be a good person, get back to the wife or the kids and redeem their life. So then the other wolves will then sacrifice themselves, so the person who has the most ideal will actually be able to live. So there does seem to, and that seems to be something of like an argument for why you should hold on to integrity, even if you're going to, you know, it seems like you're getting punished for it at the time. And it seems like, well, you need to hold on to integrity because hopefully one day you can get a break. Or you have the Tiananmen Square situation, which is you may perish, but the ideal becomes stronger, or it may actually even be the scandal to then bring down the empire, kind of thing. So it's like, you know, in the Gulag Archipelago, which is, you know, that was done through many wolves as well as people trying to do the right thing. And it's the same thing with the movie The Piano Man. Which was a story about a Jew who was a great piano player, and he actually got housed by several Nazis who then tried to protect him through his career. And those stories are really told. There's like I think there's a monument somewhere about all the Nazis who actually tried and helped the Jewish people, and they sacrificed their own lives to try and help protect people. And it's like those Nazis are only there because, you know, circumstances are forcing them to be wolves. And, you know, they're really trying to protect the ideals. And like some people like saved like thousands of Jews, they protected them. It's like unbelievable. And like for the guy who actually saved the Piano Man, he actually ended up dying in a gulag. He got imprisoned, he got capped. Like, it's really dodgy. Like Europe kind of was just like, yeah, all you Nazis, Russia will deal with you. It's fine. You guys committed all these atrocities against humanity, but those Russians, yeah, it's fine if they commit atrocities against you. Like, horrific. Like, what dodgy thing like society did because they were outraged. Like, all right. Okay, so then to finish the point is lower class is dominated by psychopaths and wolves. They are out for themselves, often out of circumstances. Wolves may sacrifice themselves so an external ideal may live. The Sin Nombre movie or the Piano Man movie. Also in I Will Be a Wolf so that my child can prosper. This offers hope for those of integrity. The wolves may protect them, even if the wolves have evil within them. So that finishes up that point. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well,
I wanted to add that answer to the question that our friend asked. So I'm not sure if that should be part of this discussion or later, because
Yeah,
it
yeah, we can.
arose at the same time. Okay. We had someone who asked that how to deal with the malevolent people. So you
Right.
want to answer that?
Yeah, yeah, I've got it. It's a point and 2 points.
Yeah.
There's a point after the next one. So yeah, I'll run with that soon. All right. So then the next one we have is so this is to talk about the lower class situation. Actually, let's go with that one because you raised it right away. So maybe people are already thinking about this. So this, well, how do you actually deal with malevolent people? Actually, do you want to run with this? Do you want to open up the little study group document and explain that out? Because I think you actually wrote that note. I think I completely forgot about that one.
I can bring it up. Uh, the first thing, yes, that was in two parts, and the second part came first for whatever reason. So the second part is more general, like you can apply it to any situation. Because in the first part you have to think about the strategy and how you are going to deal with these people and stuff. But second part pretty much you can apply right off the bat, which is that when you are dealing with these malevolent people, and Peterson brings it up that you just cannot believe that a human being can like behave like that. It kind of you also feel like losing faith in humanity. It's just unbelievable when that happens. So part of the thing you could do is just observe how you are feeling because of that behavior, and how destructive it is, and then you make a resolution that I will not treat other people this way. I will not visit what they are doing to me upon other people. So and that can really help you become a better person, because that thing that they are doing to you, there might be situations in which you have more power, and it's really strange what happens to you when you get power. You can get really out of control. So if you keep that in mind, that you will not treat others the way they are treating you, you kind of prevent that kind of darkness from coming inside you. And I have seen that in myself, that it's kind of something show you the direction in which to grow. Like you look at someone like Peterson and you're like, hey man, I wish I could do that. But then some people teaches you the direction in which not to grow. So that is something that the malevolent people can teach you. And the first point was about think of the hero, uh, the kind of hero you admire, and that would be someone who is just a, um, not necessarily someone who beats the crap out of this malevolent person, but someone who is able to kind of outsmart them on multiple levels. And we see that in movies and we admire that so much. But you also have to understand that you are not that person. You may be that person in future if you continually develop yourself, but you may not be the that person right now. So but in the meantime, this malevolence is still hurting you. For example, if you are in college and you have parents and they are kind of you know let's just say not the best parents, and you are angry. So what should you do? Should you just rebel and run away? No, because they might be paying for your education, right? And they provide a relatively safe environment for you, because uh, that house that you live in is still better than being homeless. So what do? You kind of redirect your energies, and you focus on your studies, and you try to become self-reliant. And then when you do become self-reliant, when you can go out there in the world, and it's really interesting. Once you get touched by the malevolence, you can over time turn yourself into the person who is kind of independent, self-reliant. So that's good for you. How is that not good for you? Not only that, in future you can become the kind of person who will protect other people from the malevolence, right? So I think both ways it can be a very kind of transformative experience.
Sweet. And you also had the bit here. So to recap, the points which you had in the Google document was, yeah, how to deal with malevolent people, use them as an example of how not to treat people and what not to be, and then become strong over time so that you can be the kind of person you can stop these people. And you went in a great detail about that. Next one you had was how to deal with people who are not malevolent but misguided. Help them see the light. Also help yourself in case they are right and you. I added that last bit. Also help yourself in case they are right and you are wrong. Because sometimes we can think people are misguided, and when it's actually ourselves that are misguided. So we need
That's
to
a great
keep an
point.
open mind.
That's a great point. Fuck. Right.
Yeah. And because otherwise you're just arrogant. And I think this is one of the, for those points about becoming stronger, I really think this is what is resonating so much with Peterson's message about taking responsibility, because it's not just about taking responsibility, but it's also like, how do I actually be a force to be reckoned with, where you are doing it out of ideals that actually seem to be virtuous, rather than ideals that are just based in nihilistic psychopathy, which is a really good thing, because it's like, you know, you've seen this transformation in Peterson since he became active with the Bill C-16. Like Bill 16, he's like a little knight, like shaking kind of thing, like against this fierce foe. And then now he's like, man, he's definitely that knight who is a seasoned gladiator now. So he's yeah, it's incredible to watch that transformation. All right, any comments? Otherwise I'll continue on.
Please continue.
All right. I liked it how John did the please continue while his microphone was still muted. He just did the gesture of how to continue. Alrighty, so we've got so I've added, to touch on these points, there was actually something that happened this week. I sent out this tweet, which is, there's a lot of synergies have been happening recently. The biggest is now an established worldview that I am now part of Team World. Yes, I am out for myself, but I am also out for the world. When that works together, life gets way better. Your network upgrades and decisions have more energy behind them, making you more agile and spirited in adversity, as conflicts are opportunities for team growth. Seek to avoid conflicts, but embrace them when they arrive. Be pleasant and strong to help raise everyone higher. So this is like this came through like several different sources. One is a Napoleon Hill lecture series, which was one of them. The other is I'm reading 12 Rules of Life, and all these other circumstances that are happening. But it's really interesting, like the last bit, which is, you know, and I'm also trying to run my own little company where I'm like, oh, okay, I now need to function as a CEO kind of thing. So it's like, okay, well, how do you deal with situations like in a company situation where it's like you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody or whatever it is? And, you know, there's like, I'm not now just thinking about, okay, like, you know, this didn't particularly happen in this one, but in situations where this does happen in companies, it's like, let's say someone isn't holding up their weight, right? And now you need to demote them or whatever. Then it's like, well, that's a huge emotional burden for this person, but it's still something necessary to need to be done. Like you can't function in the company if someone isn't holding up their weight, or you can't be paying them a certain amount, or maybe someone requests more money than you actually have available and things like this, right? So there's all things which are going to be emotionally hard for someone to work through. But then, you know, you could say, well, you're not holding your weight, you're fired, you know, kiss the ground on your way out or whatever. Like you can be a complete dick about it, even though you may be merited to do it. But then on the other side, it's just like, you know, when you have this team world attitude, then it's kind of like, well, this person is like, you know, you could consider them to be your metaphorical brother, right? And you're all on the same team and you're actually all earnestly trying to help each other out. It's like, okay, you weren't holding your weight here, but then, you know, let's figure out what's actually going to be better for you. How can we work as a team on this? You know, and, you know, how can we figure out something that's going to both win for you? Do you need to be moved to a different department? And that's actually been like an experience that a great manager has done for me before. and then due to just team conflict issues. Or then it's like, okay, well, oh, you know, maybe you should just come on in a few months or something like that when we have some more money or whatever it is. So you actually can work with someone where it's like, the person isn't like, oh, I just got demoted, that fucking sucks. But it's like, hey, that's actually a better plan because it's a win-win kind of thing. Like, you know, that's great. And then the other thing that I also realized with this was you can also kind of, so like sort of family members, then they may view, like they'll provide certain advice because, you know, they may protect someone. But then there's not often you find like a friend that will then tell you things that are difficult for you to hear, but they may actually be true. So for instance, like someone who is like, you know, going to join a company and then, you know, then it's like, you know, the girlfriend says, well, you need a contract. And then someone else, then the parents say, hey, well, you need to get a monthly salary kind of thing. And those are great advice. You don't want to get burned. But then the other issue is like, well, that's fine. Like that's how to prevent getting burned. But then why did you get burned in the first place? Was it really because of a lack of contract or was it something else? Maybe it is because you're too enthusiastic and you can't curb your enthusiasm to just situations which you've already established the foundations. And maybe you need to actually curb your enthusiasm to things which you can only implement once there's already a plan for your accomplishment, because then you're going to utilize your time better. And that's one which then takes the individual's responsibility rather than responsibility of them demanding things from the external environment. And that's something that is another like hard-hitting thing. So it's like, well, what do you, like, how do you communicate that? But then, you know, when you have the team stuff, then it's like, well, if this person knows this, then they won't just be a better person for their own sake, but they'll be a better person for society's sake, as well as, you know, it benefits the team. So it's like this profound like idea, which is, you know, but it's also funny, right? Because a while ago, I sent out a tweet. It was like in December. And it was actually a really good one. So I want to read it out. Gosh, when was it? What? Maybe I didn't send it out. Maybe I just thought I did. It was something which is cynicism. So like, what's he called? The really tall guy, quite ugly, famous comedian, late night show, Conan O'Brien. On his farewell show, he said something about how cynicism has no purpose, it's completely useless, do not trust it at all, get rid of it. However, look up the definition of cynicism, and it's cynical, believing that people are motivated purely by self-interest, distrustful of human sincerity or integrity, doubtful as to whether something will happen or whether it's worthwhile, contemptuous, mocking. And then 2, concerned only with one's own interests and typically disregarding accepted standards in order to achieve them. So the second one is fairly bad, but then again, like this is a little bit, that was why Ayn Rand was heralded as someone who is fairly evil to an extent, because when you think about it, it's like, well, you know, what's the difference here with like this tweet that I sent out this other day, which is a lot of synergies have been happening recently. The biggest is now I am an established worldview that I am part of Team World. Yes, I am out for myself, but I'm also out for the world. So I ended up saying, well, everyone is actually out for the self-interest. And when you actually realize this, then you can actually work together to help each other achieve the self-interest. And then everyone wins. Because otherwise, if you're selfless, then what you're doing is you're actually aligning with something that will make you resentful. Or if you expect the other person not to align with their self-interest, you expect them to sacrifice without reward, and then they're going to become resentful. Like, it's not a sustainable situation. Like, you need to then think, everyone is out for their own self-interest. How can I accelerate and help that? And that's like, that aligns with like cynicism in some aspect, but it doesn't align it with the other side. So it's like cynicism, it's like, that's actually true when you actually consider it as like a theory for team engagement. But it's not true if you just view it as like, you can't trust anyone because they're just out to get you. I really wish I had that tweet, because the tweet I did on cynicism really was quite good about this. Maybe Twitter hid it.
Yeah, that's actually after our conversation the other day. That's kind of been rattling around in my mind is the in every single action in our world, even morality. And so whatever works, like say we have an expected outcome, and then we utilize that expected outcome, and then it for us. You kind of build off of that for thousands upon thousands of years. That's how you can kind of that's what you were saying last conversation. Let's see. We were trying to describe what morality is. And so what I wrote down here is morality is a supposedly objective look backwards in time over all of the subjective experiences from the past that were positive or negative, or that had a positive or negative outcome. And then for the people that have kind of utilized these different actions in the past. And then we use that to influence our actions into the future. So we have all of this kind of prior knowledge to realize, okay, if we were to act out in the same way that, say, Hitler acted out, that would lead to a negative outcome for ourselves. And so we can see, okay, that's bad. We don't want to follow in the steps of Hitler. Similarly, if we kind of look backwards to see specific individuals that have kind of risen to the top, and we see as being inspirational or impactful, and something that we aspire to be like. We kind of aggregate them all together, and then we use that. Okay, and this was useful for him because it's helped everyone surrounding him as well, and himself. Kind of like Socrates. If you look back at Socrates, he was kind of this person that, despite dying at a not from old age, but kind of from his own choice, he was somebody that was influential upon everyone around him, and kind of, like you were saying, created a brotherhood of individuals where they are not bound together through genetics, but are instead kind of bounded together through this kind of invisible connecting factor between them. Just like all of us are kind of bound together under the umbrella of Jordan Peterson in a way, even though we kind of diverge from Peterson in our own respects, we're all bound together by that central value that we hold, that Jordan Peterson is somebody worth listening to. And so that's kind of our family value in a certain respect. And that's how, okay, so that's how kind of morality of us. Now, you were saying that everyone is always, like, if you scale back all the way, they're cynical, and I agree with that. But as we were also talking about before, both in the chat and then later when we were having our discussion, the female psyche seems to be kind of not backwards from the way that men think, but definitely different in a specific way that we have to realize. In that, because empathetic towards other people, they have this kind of core value within themselves of making sure that the people that are around them are flourishing. So the kind of more masculine dominant value that men have, or that the left brain has, that you kind of have, is to feed everything towards yourself, and to feed yourself, and through that you can also help others. Now, for the feminine value, it's kind of help others, and then that actually also feeds yourself, because, like, if you see other people around you doing good, that you feel good. Perhaps the feminine psyche approach to happiness, or for a positive outcome for themselves, is to see, like, say a man and a woman kind of graft together into a marriage, and we've had that for we've evolved to a point where we're compatible with each other. And so if one of us is specified towards taking care of the children and the people around them, and the other is specified towards being a hunter-gatherer type, then the one that is specified towards taking care of children and being and kind of staying in one position, they're going to have to, in a way, live vicariously through the actions of the person that they're grafted towards. So their husband, or that's the thing with personalities. It's kind of the yin and yang for everyone. Like for myself, I have a kind of father that's, I don't know, his psyche doesn't exactly align with the typical male psyche. In fact, my mother's kind of more adventurous and my father's more worrisome. And so it's whether or not it exactly aligns with the biological sex, there's these opposites that will attract and kind of fulfill each other where it's necessary. And yeah, anyway, I wanted to bring up that point because that was something that was really influential for myself in trying to understand just how much there could be a difference in how a female or a feminine brain may look at something compared to a masculine brain. It's not even just brain, it's just their kind of outlook for life. Just in the same way that different ideologies kind of cloud the way that we perceive facts, different personalities will affect how we are affected by the things that we see. So positive outcome or a neutral outcome from seeing like somebody else benefiting or something like that.
Cool.
Anyway.
Sumit, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I will go back and listen to John's points again. I think they were good points. Ben, you were talking about enthusiasm and how that is a not optimal. Can you explain that? I didn't understand that.
Wait, what did I say?
You said something
You were
about
saying that an abundant enthusiasm can actually be detrimental towards you because maybe you're surpassing your limitations. Maybe that was your point.
So for the company situation, if you've been burned twice before because you didn't get a contract or you didn't get a salary or whatever, or the other situation, which is you worked for free before you asked for a contract, then, and that's something that I've also done. I think that's generally how people get burned. Then it's also like you can become so enthusiastic about it, and it's also like did you just devote 3 years of your life to something you had a ton of enthusiasm for, but it had no business sense? Was that really something smart to do? Or maybe you should curb your enthusiasm to only go towards things which have actually established value, and try and put your enthusiasm not to everything that can be enthusiastic about, but put your enthusiasm towards the things that are going to be most valuable.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that's a really hard problem to solve.
Yeah. Especially when you're a smart, enthusiastic guy, right? I think my personality type is I'm super high enthusiasm. So it's something that I really had to learn, which is I have a thing which is I can really only focus on one thing well a week, and then 2 things is I can delve into something else, but it's just as soon as I try and focus on 2 things equally or 3 things, then it's bam, I'm not doing good work anymore. I'm just pushing myself, and it's just and so then you have to be really careful because it's so easy to become enthusiastic about stuff. It's just man, that's interesting, right? And then it's yeah, but is this really what you should be doing right now? Yeah. And sometimes it's fun to engage in things. So for me, Sunday is my day off. So like I turn off the computer and then I go outside and go for a run and just spend the entire day outside. Because like a little bit of uncurbed enthusiasm is good, but because you can't be tyrannical with yourself all the time. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, shall I continue?
Yeah.
Great. Alrighty, so next point that I had was the middle and upper class are places where people help each other. So then this ties in with the previous points we talked about. So it's like the lower class seems to be dominated by wolves and psychopaths. And yet, as soon as you kind of escape like this lower class, then you actually really start excelling when you actually realize, when you start, being part of team world, right? And you actually, talk to people and like you like see someone who may be struggling, like, hey, I've been there and I've struggled before. Can I help you a little bit? And maybe they say no because they don't trust you a little bit, and maybe whatever. But then you can help people, and like you just help people out of this idea that eventually you'll get it back because you're on Team World. You're not just on Team Ben or Team John or Team Sumit. You're on actually Team World, and you do like a little favors for people, and then you get the favors back, kind of thing. And it's just like it's like, yeah, like that's where the middle class then starts becoming a lot better than the lower class, because that mindset is not in the lower class. You're a team tribe in the lower class. So
I just want to interrupt just enough to say that it's something that it's hard to differentiate whether or not the wolves tend to gravitate towards the lower class just because that's easier, or the people that are born into the lower class have to kind of become wolves out of necessity in order to survive at the place that they're at. I think, yeah, that's the problem, is you have to kind of see where you yourself are not acting within your own self-interest and the self-interests of the people around you. And so you have to stop being a wolf and to kind of step out of that in order to get out of the place that you're born into.
So there's the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which has been extended a whole bunch of times. Like there's different versions of it. So the exact version of it is, first you need to make sure your psychological stuff is sorted, because if psychologically you're a mess, then you can't even get safety. You just jump out of a window. So then next is once you got your psychological stuff good, then you can then focus on safety, like building a shelter, sorting that stuff out. Then after you've got a safe environment, then you can focus on love and belonging. And then after you've sorted that out, then you can focus on esteem. And then after you got that sorted out, then you can focus on self-actualization. Now, the way that I can't remember what exactly was communicated to me, but I've also seen it explained where first you care about yourself. So the levels of empathy you have. So the first is you care about your own survival. Then you care about your tribe's survival. So that could be your brothers or your family or or whatever it is. But maybe the tribe. And then after that, you then care about, I think your actually, I've already forgotten it. There's like seven hierarchies kind of thing. And it goes like me, you, me, you, me, you, me, you, as like the levels of it, because every time you progress then into the next group, then you counter the overarching parts of that by then going back to you. And then you then counter that by then going to the next step. Gosh, I can't remember it. It's actually really good, but I'll find it at some point, because I have it scanned in some notes that I digitized a while ago.
Is it Maslov, M-A-S-L-O-V?
Maslow.
L-O-W.
L-O-W, okay.
I talked, yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs was the first thing I talked about, but I don't know the me, you version of it, which is a different one. Because it's kind of, yeah, it's like levels where it's like eventually you end up in a spot where you care about, like, you get to this team world spot. Because the self-actualization area, so you can't have self-actualization if other people don't have self-actualization. kind of thing. And to some extent, you all oppress each other because that's just the way life is. So you need to then be able to agree to the extent of oppression you're willing to accept as a society. So it's like, if I'm part of Australia, then I need to agree if I do certain actions, I will be taxed. And if I do certain actions, then I will be put in jail. And if someone else does these certain actions, then I will have to pay, you know, some tax towards them, kind of thing. And if I don't like it, then I can leave Australia, kind of thing, and, you know, get citizenship somewhere else, which then has a better cost benefit ratio, in my perception. So this whole idea, like the government is oppressing you, bad, evil government, to some extent that's true, but to some extent, grow the fuck up, and if you don't like your government, then try and change it or go to a government that you like better. Like, stop being a whining person saying the government is oppressing you, because you're choosing. Like, it's not even that they're oppressing you to some extent, but you're choosing to be suppressed instead, right? So,
yeah, like there's that guy that was a huge Bitcoin investor. He was on one of the Dave Rubin interviews. He talked about how he didn't like the ways that the American government was holding itself, and so he just renounced his citizenship and lives off in one of those islands. And because he had Bitcoin reserves, he was able to kind of pay his way into one of those types of islands that are kind of like hands off.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of how America was founded, was because the British didn't like having King George taxing them by so much. And it's like it wasn't even that high of a taxes compared to certain other countries, or I think even in certain places or at certain brackets this country. But we're kind of more lenient now than the people at the time, just because we're not as I don't know, firm in our belief system, perhaps, or our own value systems that we have.
And there was also William Penn, who got money from the Queen to then set up Pennsylvania. So to set up a society where you could actually have religious freedom and correct forms of diversity as well. And it became like one of the most diverse areas, and it turned out to be a successful experiment. So after that, then the Queen then implemented religious freedom in England. So they tested it in Pennsylvania and put William Penn in charge, and then it turned out to be successful. So then they brought it back to England.
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't have any more R&D anymore because at least for America, we kind of lost that aspect because of the Civil War, where each state is its own little experimental thing that the country can then kind of pick off of. But now, I don't know, all of the states are exactly the same. But of course, that's understandable based off of the situation. But it's regrettable that we no longer have that benefit to our corporation that is the state that or the country that we live in currently, or I live in currently.
Yeah. And you also have the European Union and the United Nations, which wish to run experiments on every nation at the same time without actually getting the results from any.
Yeah.
So, but there is a thing called seasteading.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that.
So this is an idea of setting up little mini. So set up cities in the ocean in international waters where they can test government structures or societal structures. All right, so okay, we're on to another thing that I thought of today when I went for a run today, and it ended up looking like I was going to get caught up in the monsoon. And I was just like, because I thought at some point I was just like, should I keep running or should I turn back? And I was like, nah, I'll keep running. And then the monsoon comes, which I didn't see earlier, and I was just like, all right, I better take the quicker way home, and then jumped over a fence and then continued on my way home. But I got caught up in the monsoon. But I'm running in the bloody monsoon, and I'm like, this is bloody awesome. How cool is this? So then I was thinking about it. I was just like, well, you think about this in the colloquial sayings, right? Like, it's all fun and games until someone gets hurt, which is then used to discourage teenage delinquency, where they're always trying to improve the bravado on each other. Like, it's all fun and games, like seeing who's the most brave teenager until someone breaks an arm. But then I thought about it today, which is, but it is through hurt you realize where your boundaries are, And then through attitudes, you then learn how to overcome and grow stronger, right? Because if you never, you know, have those fun and games, like if you're just always worried about getting hurt, you're never going to figure out where your boundaries are. Maybe your boundaries are way further than it was without getting hurt. But then if you do get hurt, then you know how to better deal with that boundary next time and how to overcome that boundary next time. So,
it's something that I don't know. I want to implement quite a bit more, and I'm attempting to fairly soon. But that testing of my limitations to see just how far I can go. Because there's this kind of I don't know the term for it, but it's something that has to do with like a lot of runners or different athletics. Is your brain will kind of tell you that, oh, you can't go any further right at about like 50% of your capacity. And so like if you're capable of going past that, oh, my brain, your brain telling you, oh, you can't go any further, you're about to die. If you can get past that, you get the second wind, and then you can go about 50% more. Even though, so if you were to stop at that point where like your brain was telling you, don't go any further, you're going to kill yourself, then you'll be living your life at 50%, and then over time that 50% could even then go down to 25% perhaps, and then even further down from there. But
you lose the effect of compounding interest of your potential.
Yeah, there is a book on that. Its copyright has expired, so it's available there for free. It's called Energies of Man by William James.
Oh, William James. Oh, cool.
So that talks about exactly the same issue that you are describing.
Yeah, it's cool because I'm running the monsoon and I'm like, man, my life is so good. This is the best thing ever. I feel so good right now. Like, you know, I've got the runner's high completely. Like, you know, the endorphins kick in and you get the goosebumps and you just feel like you're on drugs kind of thing. It was amazing. So, yeah, it's like when you realize like how do I get that runner's high, then it's just like, man, your life gets so much better. So, all right. Okay. Because it's like an attitude thing. I'm not saying my life is the best thing ever, but it's like it's a complete attitude thing. All right, Bible. So we're on back to the Bible thing. So there's a lot of discussion in the second Bible one about reality and things like that. So we've got the points here, which is Bible is a revised document. We then entered into a free will versus agency discussion. And we also try to figure out what the hell Peterson actually means when he uses certain words, because he is not using the dictionary definition of certain words. So maybe we'll start off with the deciphering Peterson thing first, and then we'll go to the free will versus agency, and then we'll talk about how the Bible is a revised document. So deciphering Peterson is in the 12 book of 12 rules he has. There's a thing where he says atheism. Let me actually pull up the exact quote because it is something that will add context to any listeners. All right. Does it mean that what we see is dependent on our religious beliefs? Who is the punk typing?
Not me.
Meaties. All right. Does that mean? Okay. Does that mean that what we see is dependent on our religious beliefs? Yes. And what we don't see as well. You might object, but I'm an atheist. No, you're not. And then he talks about how he doesn't actually, and in various interviews, how he's talked about he doesn't believe atheism exists. And in it even, he says about atheism, he implies at the end, with these words, which are in a connected paragraph, you don't understand anything. You didn't even know that you were blind. So this is on page 164, I think, of 12 Rules of Life. It's in chapter 4. And it's just like, well, what is he talking about? So you pop up the definition of like atheism, and it's disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. I mean, that's the thing. atheism.
Bye, Sumit.
A non. Ah, is he going?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's
it
getting
is.
too late for me.
All right, no
All right.
worries.
I'll
See
listen to you
Sumit.
guys later. Okay, bye.
Enjoy your work. Yeah, so then atheism is like it's the lack of belief in a deity, right? And theism is the belief in a deity, like theistic. It's based off the origins of the word deity. So, but deity is, when you look up deity, it's like an intelligent God. It's like, so Peterson, you can grant him that God is the thing that arbitrates the rules of a system. But then that can also be secular to an extent. So it's like, okay, and we use God in all sorts of ways. Like the word God, we've been using, twisting its definition for a ton of time. When deity is specifically like a god or goddess or the creator and supreme being, a representation of the god or goddess, such as a statue or carving, or divine status, quality, or nature. But specifically, like a god can just be, like Peterson says, well, your God is whatever you value most. And if you're an alcoholic, then alcohol is your God. If you're a womanizer, then women are your God, or whatever. But then deity, you can't say that the alcohol is a deity, because that alcohol isn't intelligent, right? Like it's not a creator or supreme being of the objective world. So then it's just like, well, what does Peterson actually mean here? And it seems instead of atheism, he actually means the term secular, because atheistic is just like a category of people. Like you don't believe in a deity, then you're atheist. And that seems to be fairly good, because it's like there is no evidence for believing in deity, but you can also believe in the God or gods, using Peterson's definition of gods. Now, secular, however, is not connected with religious or spiritual matters, not subject to or bound by religious rule, not belonging or living in a monastic or other order, of or denoting slow changes in the motion. Okay, the other ones aren't related to religion. So the first two, secular, so you can definitely say, like, if you swap out secular in that paragraph in chapter 4 with atheism, or you swap out atheism for secular, then it makes complete sense, because you're a fool to then consider yourself secular when your entire values have been influenced by religious beliefs that have propagated through time. And when Peterson then, but you can also have a pushback on that, but then you have to think, well, what does Peterson actually think? Like, how does he define religion? So then Peterson defines, he said this, we looked in a few different interviews. So it seems Peterson then defines, he said specifically he considers ideology as a parasite that attaches itself to religion. And just a little bit back in that chapter 4, he then talks about it again. So it seems like ideology is man worship when religions worship the metaphysical. So religion is something that orientates itself around what is good and evil, when ideology doesn't really have that aspect. But to some extent, because if you use the definition, then religion is an ideology. And then if you're a Christian, you could become a Christian ideologue. Like, these would be fitting definitions. But if you then consider ideology as man worship and religions worship the metaphysical, then you can understand a bit more about what Peterson is talking about. And then you think, well, what does he mean by metaphysical? And it seems metaphysical truth is...
Hold on. Yep. Go back. Sorry. Ideology is man worship. I'm not sure if that's accurate.
Sorry, I should have has maybe is man worship or has man worship. So the risk here is, like, when you consider what Peterson then considers ideology, so you'll consider Nazism, or you'll consider nihilism, or you'll consider other like categories of that. And the thing which is common across all the things Peterson considers an ideology is they either think that you're the ultimate God, or some other human is the ultimate God. They don't consider that and be like the meta God that is higher than anything that is man.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily, because for Marxism, the God that they worship is the idea of utopia, that they can create a utopic state. And so even if that requires killing of every single man that's in your way, they're not even working towards the betterment of some sort of aimed towards the benefit of a single man, Hitler. But for say Marxism, that definition doesn't perfectly fit. I think it kind of works as, well, okay, so nationalism and Marxism or communism are both kind of not necessarily the worships of some sort of specific man, or even the worship of kind of the aggregate of complete man. These are both idea worships. So everything that a person is doing is kind of devoted towards manifesting this idea. Like say for nationalism, it's trying to make this nation into the greatest nation ever before and ever to be. And so one way of doing that is to wipe out any other nation that gets in its way. So that's kind of an idea worship. There's certain like cults that can be, I would consider as man worship. So that's kind of how we kind of got to some sort of place where Peterson sees religion as kind of a aggregate of many different stories that kind of influence our behavior and in a positive way, or there's certain religions that will go towards a negative way. It's just a kind of a narrative structure for people to live their lives, ideally for the better. Now, and then he sees ideology as kind of a sliver or a subsection to religion, even if it's not like the religion of Christianity. It's kind of that same, like if religion is kind of a multifaceted story, ideology is like taking one facet out of that and saying, okay, everything that drives men is towards power. Every man is attempting to gain more power. And then you can kind of derive a sliver out of that and say, for some sort of cult, I'll use Scientology in this case, even though it's kind of probably transcended its cult status because the leader has died. But at one point, L. Ron Hubbard was kind of the person worth that everyone within that ideology was worshiping. So it kind of, there was no like idea exactly that they were working towards. It was kind of more a mystery idea that I don't know. With like nationalism and Marxism, it's easy to kind of pinpoint what it is that is going on, but Scientology is kind of so closed doors, it's hard to really know what they're doing. It's supposed to be, I guess, unlocking the human potential within themselves, and they go about doing that by kind of the similar tactics of fear-mongering, such as in 1984 or in communist countries. But anyway, I think the biggest takeaway that I
hear you finally say something, John, that will piss off a certain demographic. So far, you've been completely clean in all these recordings, and now you've finally done it.
Oh, Scientology? I don't care. Okay. Now, I think the biggest takeaway from our discussion that we had before was that Peterson does, as you said, he does not go off of the dictionary definitions for each of these different terms that he uses. So like religious ideology or anything like that. He said before that he considers himself an existentialist. So he looks at some sort of label that are placed on top of all of these people, and instead of taking what the label says it's supposed to mean, he's looking at, okay, everyone who's under this label is behaving in a similar fashion, and you can kind of recognize what that similar fashion is, and then you can kind of extract from that and see that other people are using that same, are behaving in the same way as these other people, even though these people over here, they're not calling themselves by this label. So a common complaint that people have with Peterson is that he overemphasizes the dangers of postmodern thinking that is tied with neo-Marxism. And so people are saying, we don't consider ourselves postmodernists or neo-Marxists. We just care about the human rights of transgender people or of people that are oppressed. And so he sees their actions that are going on, and he aligns those actions to what he's also seeing are the actions under, and so that's why he kind of labels everything postmodern neo-Marxist. It's almost like a kind of a throwaway that he doesn't need to think about. It's like, it's funny, there should be a drinking game every time that Jordan Peterson says postmodernist, he follows it up with neo-Marxist. I don't think I've ever heard him say postmodernist without following it up within like the next 5 seconds with neo-Marxist. It's kind of a funny, yeah. It's not even a quirk. It's a cliche now at this point. So it's like it's built into his verbology, where whenever he says one thing, it leads to the other. Okay, so, and you have to also consider that how he defines religious is very different from how the dictionary definition of religious would be. So he's said before, like on this interview with, I think, Glenn Beck. No, it was with Dennis Prager. At the very end of the interview, Dennis Prager asked him, and are you there?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit. I got Dennis Prager asked him, and then I didn't get anything else.
Yeah, he asked him if Jordan Peterson considers himself religious, and Jordan Peterson agreed fairly easily. It wasn't like one of those things where he sidestepped quite a bit. He said, "Yeah, I consider myself religious." And then in another interview, somebody has asked him, "Do you believe in God?" And that's one of those questions that he really tries to sidestep quite a bit more than all of those. And so what he kind of finally came down to when he was what he ended up saying was, I behave in a manner as though a God exists. So it's very different from believing in God, and that's kind of
it's so easy, like.
Well, hold on. Yeah. So in my own mind, the term religious or even Christian, that is associated with I believe in God. And so for himself, that's not necessarily a connection that is within himself. So even by him kind of using the label I'm a Christian, that he's aligning himself with a lot of other pre-existing connections that we all have in our mind, because like when he says Christian, he believes in God. But that's not necessarily correct, because, or at least that's not necessarily specifically accurate. So that's a problem, yeah, for sure, because he's using these words, but he's trying to redefine them in a way that best suits his purpose, where he doesn't have to stick himself down into a specific little box.
Yeah, it really seems like he's running the risk of being viewed as if he's using sly and cunning to use equivocations to hide his real motives, whatever they are. So it's it really risks him coming across as disingenuous, because it's such like I
don't necessarily see that he's doing it in order to hide some sort of side goal that he's doing. But I definitely agree with you that because he's doing this, that's going to have negative outcomes for all the people that are, I mean, this word religious is kind of in our zeitgeist, and we have a specific definition that we all kind of go by. It's just like what we were talking about earlier. We all are playing the game where we're agreeing upon the rules or the definition of what religious is. And then he's saying, yeah, I'm religious, but he doesn't he doesn't agree with the rules that we've assigned this word religious.
Or maybe he does believe in that there is an objective Christian deity,
Yeah.
and he does believe it, and he's just keeping it under wraps to achieve the largest audience he can without getting himself boxed in. So that's like where, like, you need to give him a lot of slack in order to be able to tolerate and to be able to get Peterson's wisdom. You need to offer him a lot of slack around this definition ordeal.
Well, you have to at least devote the time within yourself to figure out, okay, he's using this word. Do I know what he's meaning when he's using this word? Because it doesn't seem, the way he's using this word doesn't feel exactly the same way that like a Christian fundamentalist is using the word religious. Like you have to pin him down to how he's defining these words that he's using. And it could just be because he's using them in the existentialist way, where he's defining them based off of behavior, not necessarily off of beliefs. So like he behaves as somebody who believes in God, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, or at least he's saying that there's an equivalency to if somebody behave. Okay, so you can say that you believe in God, but still behave as if nothing that you do matters. So for him, can you hear me? Okay. So somebody will.
The time it came back, there was a pause, and then there was a burp.
Yeah. So somebody might say that they believe in God, and then behave in a manner that's closer to nihilism. And so for him, he would say that their label that they're using is incorrect, or at least it's not accurate. So he would, I would assume, not term that person as actually religious, even though they themselves call themselves religious. That's just a false label that they're putting on themselves to make them look better. So it's kind of like the I believe in equal rights, or I don't know. It's one of those things where people are virtue signaling in a kind of way where they're saying one thing, but they're not behaving in the exact way that they should be if they truly believe in this thing. And so I think that's where the confusion is with him using the word atheist there, because he's saying that people are calling themselves atheists, though they behave in a way as if there is some sort of deity that is holding them, that is constricting their morality in some sort of way, or at least constricting their. Okay, it's just like what you were saying, that people behave in a way as if there were a God. Like for alcoholism, there doesn't have to necessarily be a God that's within alcohol that is causing us to worship it in the kind of colloquial sense because of kind of feeding it into it. So, yeah, you really have to pin, especially in that paragraph, because that's where it's going to be. That's where he's kind of set himself up. Okay, so like what you were saying earlier, when he started out this whole kind of process, he was a very timid knight. And now he's kind of gotten to that high stance where he has a large following. And so if he were to write a book for all of his following, he would not have to define his words every single time, because he assumes that everyone who's reading his book maybe already kind of gets the idea for what he's meaning by atheist and religious in these fashions. But he's kind of going at it, like you were saying, it would have been better to have more outsiders from his own perspective reading his book and kind of criticizing it, like somebody that's.
So just for the audience, yeah, like my suggestion was to get, like, say, Sam Harris to review the book and then provide feedback before it's publishing. Yeah, because 12 Rules to Life, if you haven't read it yet, it's about 30 or 40% Christian fables and whatnot, and so you could, it's indistinguishable from a book that you would consider to be a Christian book. more or less. So
I can see that, especially if like you were a Christian that were to read the book, you would be, whenever he's using these words, you would instantly kind of, and for even people that haven't interacted with Jordan Peterson, like PewDiePie, you would read this book and then associate all these things with the common zeitgeist that we have for these definitions already. Yeah, it's kind of a problem of limited language that we have, perhaps, or at least, yeah, not enough people realize. Like I myself didn't really come to grips with the fact that he's an existentialist, so he's not going to be. He's using these labels in a way that is based off of behavior, not based off of what the label itself means. So, yeah. and that's what gets him in a lot of trouble from, like I was saying, the critics of him are saying that postmodern neo-Marxist is kind of a label he's throwing onto everything, even though the people themselves don't accept that label, even though they behave in a similar fashion to the people that do accept that label.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the issues here, like to run with the existential aspect, is Peterson doesn't seem like, maybe sometimes he does it, but overall he doesn't seem to distinguish the difference between subjective and objective truth. Well, the phrasing, he'll say, well, Dostoevsky and the stuff he writes about is true, but it's true from a fictional perspective, but it's still true. So it's not true in the same sense as a scientific truth, and the Bible isn't true in the same type of scientific truth. So it seems the words he's actually going for is there's objective truth, which doesn't require a witness, and then there's subjective truth, which requires a witness. So the metaphysical truth is inside the subjective truth, and it's not an objective truth, nor even a universal truth. So it can be true for an individual from their perspective, from their subjective relative experiential knowledge, but not true for others. And this can be delusional at times. So the thing is just like, someone can profess like a religion, but then it's universal among the beliefs of good and evil are universal to the relative audience of the followers of that religion, which is, the people were either that was indoctrinated into them, or then they said, well, which religion actually seems to fit best with my experiential reality that I've experienced so far? And then I'm going to pick that religion because it seems most true. But then it's true only from your experiential, relative, subjective experience. So then there's always a risk here, which is that Peterson may be butting heads with, which is that it's very dangerous to then not be stating this stuff clearly, because even historically, like, people have done horrific things in the name of religion because they really believe things were true, but yet they turn out to be delusional. And there needs to be an acknowledgement that a subjective truth to some extent is always relative, and you try and get the most universal relative truth as possible, because that's going to be the religion that wins. Whereas an objective truth, it doesn't matter on how many witnesses agree with it, it's still going to be true. Now, with both versions of truth, truth still revises itself. And maybe Peterson is implying this, but it seems he's never actually stated this. So in the book, he says, I'm gonna mute you to prevent the coughing from coming out. All right. The religion is, so Peterson writes just a few paragraphs back from what I read earlier, is religion is instead about proper behavior. It's about what Plato called the good. A genuine religious acolyte isn't trying to formulate accurate ideas about the objective nature of the world, although he may be trying to do that. He's striving instead to be a good person. Right now, the thing is that so with Plato and Aristotle and those philosophers, it was pretty much their version of science was ask everybody around, find out what was common among all those answers, and then that is true. But the thing is that they could all be fools, or what is true for their little society may not actually be true in a different society. at all, because different societies or different environments may actually have other gods, so rule makers of that environment, that then reward different behaviors, because you need different behaviors in different environments. Now, and then this is kind of what Immanuel Kant wrote about in the Critiques of Reason, which is just because you can argue something doesn't make it true. So then that was I think Immanuel Kant was one of the founding fathers of science, of scientific thinking, and there was many, but he was one of the big ones. And that Critique of Reason was that one was a really big one. So it's the idea of the establishment of objective truth and subjective truth. And it's fascinating because you go before Immanuel Kant, and people they Aristotle, true was actually really to the extent of, go around and ask everybody and find out what it was common, and then that's true. But before that, then true was just what you personally believed. So it's the word true has changed and revised over time. Now, it's saying the same thing with religions. One of the things that then puts Peterson in an interesting position is his view of Christianity is this religion that has pulled pieces from all these other prehistoric non-Christian religions. And then it's come out to be the best result of that. He goes at the foundation of morality, of Western values kind of thing, which is a little bit funny because it seems it then says, well, that's the foundation, that then calls Western values, rather than it was the Bible was written as a reflection over what values were working. So the thing is that you then had, we didn't add this in the notes. So you had this yin yang of the ought and is. Maybe you can explain that a little bit, because I got to run to the toilet.
There we go.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. I'll go off of that, and then I'll go backwards to I think Peterson's main main conflict with your argument. So in order to kind of derive an ought, we talked a little bit about it earlier. It has to be kind of based off of the is. All of the ises that have occurred in the past throughout all of existence, and all the ises that you can kind of witness through your eyes. Now, these are all in order to get the ought still, though, you can't just have the is, because we as subjective humans, we have to look and realize, okay, this is. These are all facts here, and these are all feelings here. And so we have to see, okay, these facts cause bad feelings. We don't like that. These facts over here, these cause good feelings. We do like that. Okay, so these are all ises that we're able to subjectively see and recognize. And so that is our basis of morality, because we kind of aggregate all of those together all throughout time, and even utilizing our imagination, as with Dostoevsky. They're fictional stories, but we can still derive useful information out of them in order to influence our behavior into the future. So that's causing. So all of these ises that we've recognized are causing an ought for what we should do. And then if we continue doing that over and over and over again, because this ought that we do, oh no, maybe it results in a bad outcome. Oh, that's not very good. Okay, we'll have to add that to the ises. We'll have to add that to our series of facts. And so now, since we're subjective humans, we're able to recognize, okay, this expected outcome occurred, and so I have to create a new ought. So now take that. I have to now take that previous negative outcome into account when I'm going forward. So that's not exactly to say that you can derive an ought directly from an is, because in order to recognize ises, in order to recognize facts, you have to not be an is. You kind of have to be an observer of this. And so you can't, without the observer that's able to kind of recognize all these things, you you're in a dead state. It's like the universe prior to humans' existence. Who knew that there was a universe? It's not like you can prove that there was a universe prior to our own existence, because in order to do that, you have to exist in order to prove whether or not something exists. Okay, and now
just to add on to
yeah.
this bit, which is one of the other things though, is the is's. Like, you could be just studying something unrelated, and then suddenly, bang, you turn out to, like, you know, it's like you know, discovering the Earth is actually round instead of flat. It wasn't something that was derived out of an ought. It was just like, well, that happened to happen, right? And then after that, then we can start deriving, like, some things with that influence the oughts are just accidentally discovered. So it's not like all the oughts are directing the is's. The is's, but we use, like, it seems, all the is's to then influence the oughts.
Yeah. Okay. So now I think that was kind of a rudimentary explanation of how pragmatism works, because Jordan Peterson is a pragmatist. He doesn't believe that we as limited beings are unable to recognize or are unable to know anything objectively true, because in order for something to be objectively true, it has to exist without the observer there. And so, oh, that's an objective truth right there. You're kind of proving yourself wrong because you're the observer and you're seeing it. That it means that whether or not there's an objective truth there, what we have currently is the subjective observation of whatever is there. For all we know, we could be living inside of a matrix, and everything, we're just a brain in a jar. And so in order to live in the world, we have to not rely upon whatever objective truth is because we can't exactly we're unable to have an objective truth because we exist. So the next best thing is to base all of our oughts off of everything that we recognize and see to exist. So if Galileo looks up and sees that Jupiter has orbiting moons around it, he recognizes, okay, from my perspective now, that could mean that we ourselves are not on a flat plane. We're on some sort of global sphere, just like the moon and Jupiter and the things orbiting Jupiter. Okay, this is a new truth now to all of the universe. Okay, it's not an objective truth that has suddenly occurred all of a sudden. It's a subjective truth that is now all of a sudden occurred, and for the witnesses, the inhabitants of the universe, kind of have been able to look into the universe and see something and then recognize it. Okay, so as you're only able to recognize these certain what appear to be objective truths based off of your limited situation. So if you were to go back in time and to tell the people that let's say around the time of Genesis, so 6,000 years ago or so, and to tell them the world is not flat. I know it looks flat to everybody here, but it's not flat. You're on a ball. You're on a big ball, and it's rotating around the sun that you see up in the air, in the sky. The sun doesn't go back and forth, or not back and forth, but around and around. It's the Earth happens to spin, and it also is going around the sun. Now,
it sounds so absurd just when you say that as well. Like, no one's going to believe you if you said it that way, because
I know.
Not intuitive.
and it's not like something that you can prove to be true to them either. For them, you're a crackpot, because what you're saying does not fit with everything that's observable evidence for them at that time. So you have to rely upon what observable evidence you have at this time, along with the evidence that other people have found as well. So like scientists, like sociologists, like bricklayers, like you kind of have to rely upon all of these things, because you can't objectively prove every single thing yourself. And even if you did, you don't know if it's objectively true or not. It could just appear to be objectively true, and you're misleading yourself in your own fashion. You have to have a malleable idea of what truth is in order to function in the world, because if you ever become steadfast in some sort of objective truth that you have, that limits you from being able to surpass it, because at this point in time, you're limited by your own limitations, by your own understanding of the universe. And so you can't surpass that unless you have an understanding that, okay, what I know at this point in time may not be completely accurate, but it's useful right now. And I can keep on doing this until I can excel from this point up into a point where I learn something new. And this new thing will now have to be integrated into my understanding of what is true. And from there, I can move up another point. And then you can keep on doing that over and over and over again. And you're just adding in all of these new is's that you're recognizing, and then able to progress upwards from there. So if you were, say, Isaac Newton, you could say that your understanding of the universe is objective truth. This is it. This is exactly how the universe works. We don't need to go any further with this. Then, say, Einstein comes along, and though it got us. What is the quote that I think both Newton and then Einstein said? If I see far, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants. So Einstein derived his theory of relativity because Newton's theories were utilized into the world, and they didn't quite fit properly. So Newton had his theory for how the universe works, and Einstein and plenty of others used that theory for a long time, up until the point where it no longer works. And so from that, you have to derive the theory of relativity. And then from that, you have to derive quantum mechanics. And then from that, perhaps string theory. And then after string theory, you could have something else that goes even further. You can't ever have this objective truth, because as we are using what we think to be objective truths, it may turn out to be that, turns out we were wrong, guys. We got to say everybody else in the past was wrong, and we now are right, and we're always going to be right. If you're believing in this thing that is objective truth, believing that you have the capability of knowing objective truth, you're setting yourself up for failure, or you're setting yourself up to look like a fool.
I'm not sure that's the case, because it seems that people who believe in the pursuit of objective truth are those who are willing to revise the subjective truths. Because if you're just stuck with subjective truth, then you would believe truth ends with your perception.
No. For the pragmatist point of view, it doesn't end with your perception. It's a tool. Just like every other thing that we interact with is a tool that leads us towards discovering that objective truth. Even though, and then that next level of truth that we add to our tool belt, that allows us to kind of get to the next level of subjective truth. That we're always aiming towards understanding the objective universe as it is, but being limited by our own drives and desires and misconceptions and our own biology and our own feelings for how we want the universe to be, we're going to be blinding ourselves. And it may be that we have this idea of what objective truth is, and something new comes along, and you'll say, that doesn't fit with what I know to be true. So that's obviously some sort of lie, and you're hallucinating. Yeah. Just like with the Catholic Church, you become an orthodoxy, where they know because of the Bible, oh, the earth is flat and it's stagnant, it's not moving, the sun goes over. If you're to say anything other than that, we're going to crucify you, or the equivalent. I mean, in our day and age, it's just, you're a crackpot. Oh, you don't believe in climate change, you're a crackpot, you're an idiot, you don't believe in the scientific truth. And that's the thing, we have to have this conversation between okay, this scientist over here, he's got this understanding of what, from his own observations that he's run and that he's devoted his life towards, he's come to this specific truth. And this scientist over here, he's done the same thing, but they clash. They can't both have objective truth. We have to take both of these things into account and try and figure it out from there. And even if our conclusion is incorrect, if it's useful into getting us to the next step, then that's a good enough truth for our needs. That's pragmatism. That's the theory of evolution. That's what evolution is we're always working at becoming more capable. And even if, like, we get to a point where, okay, our eyes are extremely perfect, almost, we're able to detect all these ripe fruits and snakes all around us and stuff, but over time, because of that, we've discovered that, oh, there's more wavelengths to the spectrum than just what we can see. Okay, well, we're limited by what we can see, but we can still, because we know that there's invisible wavelengths to us, we can still utilize that, and we can create machines that that are able to read those wavelengths, and so on and so forth.
Cool.
I don't think you can ever get that objective truth.
Yeah,
you can just get close, and then whatever works. That's what you're stuck with.
I think there may be a bit of conflation there, because like, if I think we both acknowledge truth is always your best working theory, right? Like, it's a running working theory, but it's always the best one. So, and that's why it can be revised. So then but then you still have the idea of, okay, objective is, a definition is of a person or the judgment, but it's not, so not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, is considering representing facts. And then you have also subjective, which is based on or influenced by personal feelings, the taste, or opinions. So you can think of it, it has a witness, doesn't have a witness. So then, even an objective truth can still be the best running theory, but it's still something that is still true no matter if no one's observing it. At least that's the assumption. When a subjective truth, like, when the most obvious subjective truth is feelings, right? As soon as you perish, then your feelings are no longer objectively true, because it depends on the witness. Or if you ask me about it, then I would have to communicate how I feel about something to you. You can't just like, say for instance, like Peterson's stances on certain things. We can only assume on that. We don't actually know what he's thinking. So he has subjective truths that we can't objectively verify without his input. But then we can objectively verify, what goes up must go down, and then that's true no matter. And I mean, like, sure, maybe that's our best running working theory. Maybe for some strange reason, someone throws a ball up and then it just continues going up, right? But the thing is that it's reasonable enough to then assume that continues even when no one's watching, kind of thing. So.
Now, the Peterson's argument against the attempt of objective thinking for how we, as our God. So, okay, we want objective, odd. By definition, objective truth is something that does not take into account the feelings of the subjective viewers. So you can have objective truth so you can have objective truth that is terrible and is torturous to all of the subjects within it, but it's still true. I mean, you can create a smallpox mixed with some sort of you can I forget his exact example, but it's a perfectly valid scientific experiment to create these two things. And that's what's frightening, is because if you're attempting to create things that are not best for the subjects that are creating them, then why would you want to go down that pathway? It seems like it's not a subjectively true or a Darwinistically true pathway for success. Because if you discover something that ultimately kills you in the end and makes it so that there's no more life in the universe to witness anything objectively true, that's not a very useful truth to learn.
Well, okay, well, there's going to be a difference here, which is like, for instance, like say you discover the atomic bomb and then someone blows everybody off. Then that's a problem of an ought. That's not a problem of an is. It's a problem that yeah. So I think because that type of argumentation can be used then to then say, let's stop putting research into the issues that men are facing in society. Let's stop putting research into mental health issues for men. Let's stop putting research into things we don't wish to know because it could harm a certain demographic, or then show things like, let's stop recording demographic statistics of high crimes in Sweden because we don't want to offend anybody. So you can just then start saying that, well, these things are things we ought not to know. But then the thing is, it's like, well, if you then put that into the objective realm or into science, then you should be banned from science, it seems, because science, like, you know, like the Shapiro thing, like facts don't care about your feelings. Like, you shouldn't be in the business of science just to verify what you wish to be true or want to be true. You should be in the business of science of trying to actually disprove the things that you actually hope.
That's why the Jewish culture of being kind of nomads that were always continually going throughout so many different countries that were not themselves, and discussing things and treating your neighbor as yourself. These are all very useful tools in the success for the human race, because even if you have a country that is just like that, where we don't want to do any research into IQ differences between any subsection or groups of people. That's not something we need to know. If another country that's separate from that does put in all that research and then utilizes that knowledge in order to benefit everyone within that country, this country over here will flourish, and this country over here will fall. It's kind of the survival of the fittest. That's the evolutionary law. So it's still a subjectively true thing, but it's subjectively true is something that aids life. I think that was like a Nietzsche quote is, truth serves life. And so there's things that don't serve life or the betterment of mankind. Because for Nietzsche, the Übermensch is kind of his highest ideal, which is the progressing forward or becoming more capable of evolving into something more complex. That's his idea. Okay, this is from very limited perspective of Nietzsche. I've only read part of Thus Spake Zarathustra and other things, but I believe that's his highest ideal, and that's what he's aiming towards. So whatever brings us further or towards the Übermensch is the highest form of truth. Anyway, I have to go actually, but so do you want to respond to that at all before I have to go though?
Yeah, it seems fine. Like if you then consider, because you know it is true that what we see is influenced by our value system, right? So like to say subjective truth is then what values life is then true, but then the issue is like some things, like you know, if you talk about, well, let's get a whole bunch of people to witness something that then doesn't benefit the life, like the ball going up and down, that's still going to be driven about the value system that they have, whether or not it's meaningful, whether or not they even notice it.
Exactly. So that's what I think Jonathan Haidt really is. His research is extremely fascinating for me, because there's certain situations where two different subjects will witness the same occurrence and get different conclusions. And so because of that, you have to, and then you have to put both of those conclusions and fit those two together. Because if we are this type of society that says, okay, what everyone by themselves thinks is true, that they just can follow along with that truth and take it wherever it leads them. That's not going to be very useful as a society, because we need to be able to discuss things with each other to root out, okay, is the reason that this person witnessed or has this certain truth because they have a mental deficiency? Is that the reason? Or does this person? We have to discuss these things, and using whatever we have as evidence. So the scientific method is an extremely useful way to do these things, but there's still certain things that are not able to be perceived by the scientific method. So there's the idea of there's a lot of different things, but I do believe that a lot of them have been derived from our biology. But it's not like you can go down to where our biological level is, because there's such thing as emergent behavior. So after you've kind of taken this foundation of biology, you've kind of expressed it outwards into the, like, we have words, but they're not real. You can look at, like language. We can't look at the word. We can look at what we wrote down. That's the word. But it's not like we can examine it to understand what does this mean? Because it's something that exists only within our collective unconscious, as Jung would say. All these ideas that kind of float around within us that are very real to us, because we behave and utilize these false things, if you consider a word false, and we utilize these things in order to better us, because we're able to communicate better through this thing, even though it doesn't exist. The words don't exist exactly, unless you want to derive them down to vocal intonations that are expressed towards each other. But it's not like, anyway, sorry, I have to go now. So.
Alrighty, cool. See you, John. Thanks so much. Yeah. Enjoy whatever you're up to.
Thanks. Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty. So I think that was fairly good for the subjective versus objective truth. So just to recap, the deciphering Peterson was: ideology is man's worship, religions worship the metaphysical. There was some pushback against that, which was why we got into the subjective versus objective with the Marxist thing. But it seems like Peterson's desire to not be considered an ideology is then because he could then be considered a cult leader, or where he could be considered the god. Because that generally happens in the things he considers to be ideologies. But then he considers Marxism to be one. But then I think if you consider Marxism to be implemented, then you put some people above other people. But then it's generally also like a value, like you put the value of compassion maybe above higher than others, but is it really compassionate, or are you just really putting other groups, and are those groups actually just yourself? Because it seems the way that Marxism is actually implemented is you find a way to then prop your group association up at the detriment of the people who aren't in your in-group, to an extent. So then it still seems like it's something which is, you know, for men by men, rather than something that then aligns itself with, you know, a higher God that then promotes the pursuit of revision, I guess. So we have religions worship the metaphysical, and then a metaphysical truth is subjective truth, not an objective truth, not even a universal truth. So can be true for an individual from the subjective relative experiential knowledge, but not true for others. Then this can be delusional at times. So you could have, you know, someone acting on a religion, and then they do something horrific, and then you have someone else acting on a different religion and then doing something good, and then when you actually get them together, then they battle with their ideas, and then one actually comes out victorious. So you can have methods of what associates good and evil, but then they battle each other out and they revise. And it seems as the thing that is necessary for that is then the pursuit of objective truth, because if you always want to find out what is objective, then you're willing to revise your subjective truths. And that is what's going to cause revision, then cause the best ideas to win, and cause free speech and all the rest. Now, the way that Peterson is using atheism seems to be he's intending to use the word secularism, because when you compare the definitions and the usage, that seems to be more accurate. Because again, atheism is the lack of belief in a deity, and theism is the belief in a deity. And it doesn't seem I have found anywhere where Peterson is actually considering a deity to be present, like an intelligent God that exists in the objective realm, like the realm outside of, you know, human existential belief, kind of thing. So, okay, and there's a difference, like, you know, okay, you know, certain gods do seem to exist in the objective world when you consider spirits to be the rules, and then gods to be what is the kind of the rule maker, the capital G God to be the rule maker. When the lowercase g's are the different sets of rules battling it out, or competing, when the capital G God is the guy who, or the entity that created all the other gods. But then you can still use that as a metaphorical analogy, when the capital, like the deity version of it, is something that is intelligent. It is something that is an entity. It's not just something that you can use as a metaphor. So, okay, then the next bit is there was a big discussion about free will and agency for some of the things you may have picked up with that recent discussion with John, because, yeah, so we've got the notes here. Free will could be defined as predictions of one action. That was one of the definitions we try to throw out there for free will. But then you watch Darren Brown. Darren was spelt with an E. So Darren Brown is maybe you can consider him a hypnotist, maybe you can consider him as behavioral psychologist, but he's someone who can use maybe social magic to then influence people's automatic programs to then be able to make them act in predictable ways. And so, for instance, there's a book called Influence. I can't remember who was the author, but in it he talks about how turkeys, there's a click whir sound, and then they will do a particular action. So the click whir is the sound that is made by the babies, but if you play it from a microphone, then they do the same action. So then it's like, it's a program. As soon as they get that input, they run a program. And it actually turns out humans also have those things. We get an input and we run a program. We see a snake and we go, oh, something that looks like a snake, right? We run a program. But it even actually happens from a social level as well. So there's like the program that we raised in discussion was one about, that was raised in the book Influence, was the word because is like that. So if you're in a line waiting to print something and the line's quite long, then what you'll do is you'll, if you then try and cut in, so you go to the person that, like, you know, saying, you know, can I go in front of you? Then most of the time you're going to get rejected. But then if you say, can I go in front of you because I'm in a hurry and I need to print something quickly so I can get there on time, then you're going to have resounding success. It's like 80 or 90%. But if you then say, and you think, well, that's because it's a valid reason. But you actually look into it and then you get them to then do it for an invalid reason. So then you say, can I go in front of you because I need to print something? Right? So you're saying something that should evidently be true, and it's the same reason everyone else is in the line because you're trying to print something. It's the exact same success rate as giving a legitimate reason. So it's so that was the study that was talked about in the book Influence. But you can also think about this as even more social things, which is if we see a woman, a man beating up a woman, then we get we wish to prevent the man from doing that. But if we see a woman beating up a man, we don't get the same urge to intervene. And that actually has some grave consequences, especially in modern social society. We hear about men's issues and we can easily dismiss them, where women's issues, we instantly kick into the savior mode. So there's a book called a YouTuber called Karen Strawn. She's phenomenal, and she's got something about the disposable male. So if you YouTube disposable male and then Karen Strawn, fantastic essay. It's really good. Okay, so then we can then think, okay, well, if free will could be defined as predictions of one's actions, well, that rules that out because you can predict people's actions pretty accurately. So then maybe we need to define free will as prediction of one's dreams. And then this arose from the idea that, okay, well, there's different thought processes. And this is something that I realized a few years ago, which is, and then funnily enough, John actually raised it, which is, okay, there's, you have like input, so you're reading things, whatever. Then you also have processing, you're trying to process what you're doing, and you also have output. So it's important for you throughout your day to get accurate times to input things, output things, and also process. And also to output the things that you did process. Otherwise, they'll lay dormant or unresolved, or just stagnant and then die and wither away, which doesn't actually make you feel good. So if you are inputting things, you need to be able to process it because otherwise you'll get overwhelmed. When you process it, you then need to output it to then be able to feel accomplished, I guess. So then if you think of the dreams, well, that would be the processing bits. That's something that's happening internally, and it seems to be the most unpredictable thing we know. Like, who can predict one's dreams? So the idea for this experiment is if you could have all the objective knowledge in the world, you were able to measure every single atom or things like that, could you predict one's actions? And already we can kind of predict someone's actions, but would you be able to predict someone's dreams? Because then this is then the intervention or the more romantic notions of free will, which is it is a divine thing that, but it also seems to be absurd, right? Because if you actually believe there is like something that isn't just hardware objective, or there's objects that are influencing your actions, so materialistic perspective, then there must be something that is metaphysical, or there must be something that is divine, like something you can't measure from the objective realm. But then if you were to believe that, then it's just like, well, then there's also the idea in regards to choices. So it's like, well, there's some type of divine spark that then is causing, like, to some extent, it's like splits in the fracture of time to set up parallel universes where you're making, where, for some reason, it wasn't just everyone is in one universe making decisions based on the materialistic things that are happening. Instead, for some reason, people can actually fracture off in a completely unpredictable direction. And then that's influenced by divine dreams that also are unpredictable. But then you also have the counter argument of like Sam Harris, which is, well, we don't have free will because we can't control our dreams. There's nothing free about it. We're not in control. We're just slaves or victims to consciousness. In which case, that seems to be a pretty good argument. So it's like, that seems to be good. But then you also have the argument then of, well, where does the stuff come from? And is it predictable? And to some extent, like, it's an open question. But I also think about this in terms of, I think at some point, my personal view is at some point it will be predictable. Because in the same way we can predict people's actions, eventually there's a episode of Black Mirror, the only episode I've seen, and I only saw it a week ago, called Hang the DJ. And in it, you have maybe just fast forward 5 minutes or whatever if you don't want the episode spoiled or whatever. But in it, you have a couple, you know, they've used a little app, and the app is meant to know everything about them. So it's trying to pair them with their ultimate life partner. But, you know, it takes like a dozen or an indefinite amount of pairings until it actually pairs you with the correct partner. So it's kind of like a trial process. You get paired with someone for this amount of time, and then it takes the input that it's learning about you to then make a better prediction next time. Not even a better prediction, but it's like it may put you with someone who you may actually despise just to see how you react, then be able to make the decision about the ultimate life partner. But then it actually turns out that it's not actually them using an app that is actually particularly reading themselves, but it's actually some people are using an app that has got all the information about these people, and now it's running simulations on their personas, putting each persona in a different circumstance. In which case, then that makes sense, because that's already what data scientists are doing. Like, the more data you have, the better business decisions you can make, or even the better decisions you can make just for life decisions. So then it would then say, well, the more data we have about us, then we may actually be able to run simulations that of how we would react. And if we can run simulations of how we will react, then we can, you know, the more data we have, then, you know, we can run simulations when we're facing moments of indecision. So then, you know, we, instead of just getting data to then about us to then make us then predict how we should act, instead what it does is it, and then, you know, you're still risking that being problematic for you because of some subjective aspect of free will or divinity, or just something that was unknown to the objective reality or not yet measured. Instead, what will happen is you try, instead of, you get enough information so you can actually run a simulation of the persona. So you put the persona through the different actual outputs. So it's not just like you get one recommended, one solution, and then your one single real life persona then goes out and does it, and maybe it's shit. Instead, you get the first level of analysis, which tells you this decision is good, but then you run your personas through it, so that way you don't actually in real life have to do it, and then you see which decision actually wins. Because maybe it turns out that, you know, the data said you should be a programmer, but then in reality you should be a bartender, and you'll be way happier because there's something subjectively true about you that actually is. But you think about this in terms of relationships, which is not just yourself making business decisions, but relationships in the episode is you get all the people who installed the app to then run their persona against all the other personas in the app, so all the other people. And then you do it 1,000 times, taking in different variations of the simulation. And then the person which you pair with 99.8% of the time is then your ultimate life partner. So it's actually testing you against the simulations of other people repetitively until it gets such a high prediction to then make an accurate decision. And then in real life, you then immediately pick the person which the 1,000 simulations of you ended up confirming that she's the right person or he's the right person. So that's good. Like, that's pretty crazy. But then you think about this in terms of, well, maybe that's what Google and Facebook bloody realized back 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, which is, you know, Google starts off as a search engine, but, you know, their initial goal was, you know, to organize the world's information. But why? Right? And it seems, and Facebook, they just like want to get more and more information. And I wrote a blog post, which is what is it? can't even remember what the blog post is called. It's quite late here though. It's like nearly 3 a.m. Okay, blupton.com. All right, it is a different way to see Google. So it's on Medium, a different way to see Google, and just search for Benjamin Lupton. And then the other one that I wrote, which is a follow-up, is what concerns me about Google and Facebook. So in these two things, I actually argue the different way to see Google is that Google is actually about creating interfaces that intercept your information. They're not actually, so you think about the business decisions that Google make, and it's actually not based on pure altruism. It's actually based on intercepting as much information as possible. So read those blog posts. So then you think about, why do they want to intercept it? And then maybe it is that, you know, every company has data scientists now working for them to analyze data to make better business decisions. Maybe the CEOs know, and Facebook like has already been caught out trying to give, you know, twist political narratives kind of thing, and also affect people's outcomes and even their emotions. They ran a test to show people sort of news stories and then measure their emotions afterwards. And Facebook can already predict whether you started or ended a relationship before you know you have. So it seems their goals may actually be to try and get as much information about you, so then it can, and in companies like there's departments in companies that develop personas about, you know, which users you have, and then it runs, you know, hypothetical tests or maybe even simulations against those personas that it's envisioned. But then you can think about Facebook is trying to, or Google, they're trying to get as much data about you to then run simulations on your personas to then be able to impact yourself for, you know, whatever wins that they want. So right now it seems better advertising, but eventually it could be, you know, whatever, you know, the people want. But then you can think about it in terms of, well, what combat is there to that? Because if they have all this data about you and they have an accurate persona that represents you, then they will be able to run simulations to figure out which arguments are best for you. And this is what Sam Harris talked about, but he didn't talk about it kind of using that tact, but he said, you know, we need to be incredibly concerned about AI because it could tell us things that really affect us. Like, for instance, if our daughter has cancer, and then it says, I need you to give me these documents from your work, and I will give you the cure to your daughter's illness, right? So it will, and it only knows about your daughter's illness, and that would work because it ran the simulations on you about, you know, tried out 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 simulations on you to figure out how you would react and which one would work. So that's very concerning. But it also ties in the free will aspect, because it's like, can people actually create accurate personas that then represent your subjective reality? And if they can, then you definitely don't have free will. Now, the other thing is free will is different from agency, because free will is like this, to some extent they're similar, but to some extent they're different. So like, the government doesn't give a shit about whether or not you have free will or not. Like, that's an existential question about all of humanity. But it does care about whether or not you have agency, and it cares about how much agency you have. And so, for instance, like children don't have pretty much any agency. So then they can commit crimes and the punishments are less. Or you can have like there's a behavioral psychologist lecture that I saw, and the lecturer then says, like, what's the similarities between a car crash, a tumor, and a divorce or something like that? And you think, okay, well, maybe someone had a car crash and they also had a tumor, so then they had a car crash and then they got a divorce. But that's not the answer. They were all used as valid reasons to let off someone from murder or something like that, or to reduce the sentence of a murder, because they were all reasons that were successfully argued that reduced the agency of the individual say, temporary insanity, or the tumor was affecting someone's hormonal and hormonal systems as well as thought processes to then make them agitated and violent. So they were all actually used then as arguments to actually say this person has reduced agency, or they didn't have agency in that particular act of murder. And then the sentence was altered for that. And you also can kill people in comas because we acknowledge they don't have agency anymore. So that's one of the things that we do. So agency is like your capacity to be able to make a decision that impacts your life to some extent, and maybe to some extent to accept the repercussions of that. That the repercussions were on you, not on somebody else. So it's like the change of a child which has zero agency, like a baby, to then being an adult is the acceptance that you have agency and your decisions were your responsibility and the consequences are your fault. Stephen Molyneux has a great discussion about agency. He's the one who made me really realize what it was. And then I really realized what it was through like The Fountainhead, as well as Ayn Rand's books. But Stephen Molyneux was really good for making me realize this. Okay, that's everything we actually covered. So the last one was the Bible is a revised document, and we covered that in terms of religions, things that actually revise themselves, or at least they should revise themselves, because otherwise it's not going to be a successful religion if it doesn't. But, you know, for the Bible, so this was an argument about, well, was everything in the Bible true? Like, is the thing which, like, for the snake, was it just happenstance that they chose a snake? Or was it, and you know, it actually turns out snake is responsible for our better vision and all this other stuff and la da 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 da. Or, you know, are there coincidences that are right in the Bible actually something of you know, profound intelligence or pre-thought? But it is also something which is that the Bible was initially stories that were told. So then with stories, they get revised and revised and revised through the verbal tradition. They get modified a little bit and the better ones win. And then as well, like the Bible, you know, it had chapters removed and it had chapters added and chapters changed and altered and translated and retranslated and re-altered and things like that as time went by. So then, and, you know, as the society conquered other societies or whatever, or integrated with the societies, then they also changed the Bible. So it's actually something which is, well, it wasn't just the thing of like, you know, they had this amazing pre-thought, but there's actually also applications of afterthought, where it's like, oh, that would actually work better. Maybe we should change this. So it had thousands of years of revision through afterthought as well before its, you know, its stability now. Where maybe this is one of the issues with Islam, because the Quran is actually meant to be holy, where it is not able to be revised. And then maybe that's going to be something that really works against them. So, all right, I'll leave it there. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to get some sleep. Again, this is a summary from the discussions we had this week as part of the Jordan B. Peterson study group, as part of the Jordan B. Peterson community. You can find out more, especially, you know, even about the reading group that we hold on every second month. The next one coming up is going to be 12 Rules of Life on March 24th. So if you're reading that book and you want to discuss it, come along for that. Otherwise, next week will probably be lectures 10 of Bible series, as well as Maps and Meaning series. Come around and, you know, let us know and whatever. Yeah, so jordanbpeterson.community instead of .com.community, and you'll find all the details there. All right, thanks. Peace.